Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world. Welcome to the Metaverse Nomads podcast, where we talk about our favorite Metaverse games. Joining me today are my fellow Nomads. Jesse, how are you doing today?
I am well, man. Excited to be here. We got a great show and just the whole industry, being GameFi and Metaverse, navigating these crypto storms without too much of tattered sales. It's all exciting.
Tattered sales. There's a lot of tattered hearts in the crypto community right now. And Bonafide, how you doing today?
Good morning, everybody across the Metaverse. I'm doing well, and similar to what Jesse's saying, no matter what's going on in the short term, if you're here now, we're all going to make it.
Very good. Ray, how you doing today, man?
You're
Besides
muted.
being on mute or silent.
I'm doing great, guys. It's
There you
great
go.
to be here with our special guest. And it's very early, so just have patience.
Very well. Fancy, how you doing today?
You're doing great. Happy to have Chypto here with us.
Very good, very good. And I'm Banjo Samurai, and collectively we are the Metaverse Nomads, and we lead a gaming guild called Rome. You can find out how to find us in the description. But most importantly, joining us today is a very special guest, Star Atlas games designer Chypto. Chypto is a key system designer for Star Atlas, and he has his fingers in a little bit of everything over there. Chypto, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. I'm excited to be here. I remember a few weeks, maybe several shows ago, I popped in unannounced, and you guys were like, who is this guy? Is he even like part of the team? And then here I am finally on the show. So yeah, it's come full circle. Love to be here and excited to answer all the questions.
Well, thanks. And, we had a little bit of, or I did, I should say, had a miscommunication. I thought you were somebody else working for Star Atlas, and I've gone under this impression for about a month now, but glad that you clarified that for us. I guess that goes to show that there's a number of community members that are being drawn into the Star Atlas team, which is fantastic because you already have a passion for what's there, right?
Yeah, we've been hiring aggressively, and to be clear, anyone else thinking this, Xcode and I are different people.
Yeah.
I'm not hosting two accounts, so.
That's funny. Well, I'm sure there's a number of people out there hosting two accounts. As they say, the game is already being played.
Yeah.
So Chypto, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to join the Star Atlas team.
Sure. So, as mentioned, I'm one of the game system designers on Star Atlas, and I joined in October of last year. Before I kind of transitioned towards game system design and crypto, I was a astronautical engineer. I worked for the military. I was in the Air Force, and I have a space background. So I was with the military, with the Air Force. I was building satellites and satellite ground systems. I served for 5 years as an officer, and then I got out and joined the civilian sector, where I continued to build military satellite systems. I did that for about 2 years. And what happened was about 2 years in, I kept, and obviously quarantine, everything was happening. I was reevaluating, well, what exactly do I love doing? And I love space, but I woke up every day and I was excited about crypto. Like I've been in crypto, the community, since 2016. Been an investor, and I've been in crypto Twitter. I'm like following all the news, and I get excited about that. I was getting excited about that every day. So I'm like, I kind of made a mental choice to kind of give it a shot. And I told the company I was working for, hey, I'd like to go and pursue this. And they said, yeah, like we're all for that. If you ever want to come back, we'll welcome you back on the team. So it was like, it was kind of, that risk was kind of mitigated a little bit. I'm like, okay, if this doesn't work out, I can go back and continue to build satellites. But I gave myself a couple months, was searching for a crypto job. I was originally looking at like more traditional crypto finance positions with CeFi and things like that. But then I started digging into the whole gaming and metaverse thing. I was like, this is super cool, and I'm an avid gamer. And I found Star Atlas, and I reached out because they're a space game. Like, hey guys, I have a space background. I love crypto, love games. Like, can I help? And talked to the right people. I ended up talking to Kelsey, and we vibed. And he's like, yeah, someone like you with that passion, we'd love to bring you on the team. And then I talked to Danny and Jacob, and we kind of saw eye to eye on the grand vision, and then they hired me. And since October, it's been a whirlwind. It's been super fun, and I don't dread Mondays anymore. It's amazing. So yeah, that's kind of my background on how I got to where I am now.
That's awesome. I have a question with regards to your past life in aerospace.
Sure.
Has there been anything along that road ever that has steered you in one way or another as to whether you believe there is life out there?
Oh, you asked me if in the military.
Give us the real alpha.
My personal philosophical view is like the space is so expansive, and there's like so many possibilities out there. I think mathematically, like, how can you not think that there's something else out there? Yeah, like that. That has to exist somewhere,
right?
And
in some shape or form.
And just because we can't observe it, like light has a travel speed, doesn't mean the light hasn't visited us yet. Or maybe there's some sort of like ONI technology that's cloaking them. Who knows? But yeah, I'm a believer, and there's other things out there. Yeah, I don't know about you. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'm a firm
I
believer.
agree. Yeah, the probability of something not is just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
I'll believe it when I see it.
I'll go as far to say I'm not entirely sure that we haven't been visited, or not entirely sure we haven't been visited yet. I think the possibility is there. I want it to be there. I want that thing to show up in the sky.
I'm kind of with you on it, Banjo. I think the chances of something not have visited us already, and the chances of nothing being out there are very slim, right?
The truth is out there.
That was the media programming us at a young age, Jesse. The truth is out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Chypto, now that you've got this space background that's real world, it's scientific, and it has a lot of real world application in math and things like that, what future game mechanics do you see being either adjusted or influenced by your experience?
So, like, one of the things that I brought up when I was talking to Danny in my interview is there's a lot of interesting things we can put in the game that is based on real science and physics. And one of the ideas I proposed is this concept of Lagrange points. I don't know how familiar you guys are with it, but the recent launch of the James Webb Telescope was sent to the Earth-Sun L2 point. And what a Lagrange point is it's a position in space where gravity is at an equilibrium. So if you think of gravity as like this vector force field, everything balances out at these particular points in space, and satellites and other celestial bodies can just rest there. They don't have to continue to spend a lot of fuel to stay in that one spot. So wouldn't it make sense that in our game we use this concept of Lagrange points to host certain space stations as like refueling spots, and the space station kind of hovers there, and it doesn't have to spend a lot of fuel to maintain that spot. So, and maybe that's a very lucrative kind of parking spot that somebody can rent out.
Right.
Or
very much so.
Yeah. So I thought that was neat. But then here's another idea. Well, and this actually happens in real space. Asteroids tend to accumulate at these spots because they kind of drift, and then they get sucked, they get held in these equilibrium points. So what if the savvy space adventurer is going around like, I want to go to the Lagrange points, and they get there and there's like a lot of asteroids sitting there, a lot of loot, and there's a reason why, based in real physics.
That sounds great.
I think
like
it's
the
super
space
cool that Star
doldrums.
Atlas hired you. I think it's super cool that Star Atlas hired you. That's a super cool idea.
So you could use some real world physics to gain some clues as to where you might find resources. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, like if we're gonna hide things on the map, let's put them in spots that actually make sense.
Right.
And then the person who kind of figures that out has an advantage. So there's some alpha there. Just neat ideas like that. And then another idea, and this has already been expressed in a lot of games, is like in crafting. Let's tie that in with some real material sciences. So if you're you're going up the hierarchy of microchips or like data or wiring and stuff. Well, why don't you tie that towards actual material conductivity? So you start out with copper. If you go to silver, that's higher conductivity. Maybe gold, maybe graphene. So you kind of go up and up the hierarchy of connectivity, and that gets you better and better electronics. Things like that is like bake that into the game, with still like an element of fantasy. Like there's going to be technologies in the game that we just can't like fathom right now. But there's also some things in the game that I'd like to bake in some realism. So there's like a blend there, and I think that'll be interesting balancing point to work towards.
So I think every guild's going to be looking for their own astrophysicist now to know where they need to go, right?
Right.
The guiding light.
That'd be fair.
So speaking of guilds, let's just get it out on the table. You're not in a guild at this time, right, Chypto?
No, I actually haven't. I've wanted to join guilds, but when I joined the community, it was very early on that I sent out that message to Star Atlas that I got hired. So I actually haven't been following Star Atlas much earlier than October. So it was actually probably around August, September where I discovered them. So I'm not part of a guild, but man, it'd be cool. And it'll be interesting how we establish our kind of company rules associated with that. I think it's in the process, but yeah, I'm not part of a guild. But
Well, you already have
if you want to do well in the game, I feel like you should be.
You already have a hashtag here, Chypto. So watch out, bud.
So I think it's a good question and a good thing to talk about, because I think there's going to be a lot of people. Well, we already established people who are passionate are going into the development team in one capacity or another.
Yeah.
And there's, as we've seen in other games, there is opportunities for unethical behavior. So I think a lot of people would love to have a developer in their guild, I'm sure. But what a stressful situation for somebody like you who goes into a guild and now you're on the hook. People are going to expect you to give them the inside scoop.
Yeah, that's something we definitely want to avoid, and we don't want to give the impression that our like the developers have an unfair advantage in the game, and then they're choosing guilds, and then guilds are getting alpha or leaked content that will help them make more money. Like that,
Right.
that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So
Yeah.
we're going to tread that very lightly, and we already have our HR team thinking about the legal and HR thinking about this. So.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Yeah.
I've seen this work out poorly in different games in the past, and thank God it wasn't real money involved at those times. So I think it's good that you guys are actually taking that seriously and thinking about it. What do you think about the possibility of it being a thing where there's not necessarily a Star Atlas guild, like a developer guild, but more like you guys are spread out amongst all the guilds in a more equal, equitable fashion?
I think that if I had to like guess on the path we should take, I think if we do want to, the developers, we want to play the game. I think we should be limited towards like playing single player, and maybe there's certain activities that we can't engage in. I'm not sure. I'm speculating here. It'll become more defined and like explicit as we get farther along in our development, that this is what the developers can and can't do, and maybe it's actually public our accounts and where we are and what we're doing. That way people can monitor, like,
I like your idea.
This guy is just like freighting his stuff back and forth, just like an average guy. It'd be nice that we're kind of trying to build on this foundation of transparency with our development. Maybe we should be transparent with how we're playing the game as well. Just my own personal thoughts on that.
I like
Yeah,
that.
Makes
because
sense.
if you're creating this big game, of course you're gonna want to be a part of it. And,
Yeah.
rightfully so.
Yeah, there's a lot of projects that are coming out that fall short in this area, and then a lot of the community gets upset very early on before there's even that growth curve, and so it's a shame.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite ships in particular?
Yeah, so if we're talking about like aesthetics, I really like Visas. Like I kind of like that stealth, pointy kind of, just very dark militaristic vibe. So Visas is probably my favorite line as far as ships go.
Do you own any ships currently?
Yeah, no, I own some ships, and I bought that at community prices, just like everybody else. I play score. I keep my ships refueled. I've been buying some more ships with the Atlas earnings. I'm just enjoying the game as if I were a community member. So yeah, I'm engaging in the game.
You know, that's an interesting thing. It's kind of like, I understand it's a touchy, it's kind of touchy about how you go about how do staff participate. But the truth is, I want everyone that's on the Star Atlas team to be able to have some way to enjoy it, because it's your passion. It's what brought you there in the first place. So you should have the same opportunities to immerse yourself in the experience for sure.
Yeah, and if it's when we released score, just like kind of pulling that thread, it was all based on VWAPs. Everybody could calculate the VWAP. It's not like certain ships had a severe advantage versus others. So I think it wasn't quite that gray on how the developers could play. We played just like everybody else. We bought ships that we liked and we were staking them. As the game mechanics become more complex, it'll become more gray, and we'll have to figure out how we tread that line. But for now, yeah, we love the ships too. We own some, and we're playing the game too.
So before you joined the dev team, did you have a profession that you wanted to play, and is it still the same?
I'm not a PvP guy.
Okay.
I'm like a PvE grind, like build up my own kind of solo ventures, and I like PvE more than PvP. So I like the idea of like freighting and mining and just the kind of the more terrestrial infrastructure. I really like doing that. I don't see myself kind of engaging in these PvP wars that are going to be in the high risk zone. I might like dip my toes in, but I don't see myself being that type of like risk forward player.
Just be out there as a spectator eating your popcorn.
Yeah. I'll eat that up, but I won't.
Well,
Yeah.
to that end, and this is a question that I think a few of us have asked a few different times, and if you don't have the answer, that's fine too. But will there be a way for people to go back and view those battles? So will there be an in-game recording of the battle so people can watch it?
I haven't seen us map that particular thing out, but I think that would be, even if it's not us, there's going to be so many ways for community generated content to get part of our like ecosystem. I wouldn't be surprised if some community member figures out a way to like record all of the mapped interactions and these battles, or maybe there's an actual career in the game of like journalism or space journalism, and record and recount events and submit a daily newsletter on this is what happened in this sector. Like that'd be fun. We don't have to do that. That'd be perfectly great content for the community to develop, and we would love that.
So you came into the company. You've got this great experience behind you. You're coming from a position of expertise. Did you see anything when you got onto the team that you knew right away had to be adjusted? Like, oh, that's not going to work. We probably shouldn't go that route, or did you kind of just jump in looking forward?
I don't think I found any like red flags or anything that hadn't been thought through thoroughly. I mean, working with Danny mostly since he's the chief product officer, he's like the vision behind the game, and that guy is brilliant. Like he knows his stuff. So I kind of picked apart some of his like ideas and maybe like added more detail or more color on some things, but there wasn't anything that kind of stood out as that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's been interesting. I've been coming on. I came on the team originally to do ship crafting, and now I'm like, I have my, like you said earlier, I have my fingers in a lot of things, and I'm like, so I've been looking at like ship combat 2 and ship metrics. Like how do you load out a ship with components and modules and swap in and out, and what will that look like? How will that feel? What's progression there? So it's been really cool that I started with one thing, but now I'm doing a lot of other things, and it's a pretty fun spot to be in because you get to see a lot of you get to work on a lot of the cool stuff.
Yeah, like go ahead, Bonafide.
Well, just to go off your last comment there, Chypto. So I know it's probably way too early to even be asking this question, but just out of curiosity, is there any thought so far as to how the ships will be balanced? PvP balance wise.
Yeah, so there's going to be, I mean, this is obvious. Like ships are going to have quantitative metrics associated with their performance, and you know, um, there have to be there's going to have to be some balancing associated with big, like those large and expensive ships. It'd be really annoying if there's some sort of game mechanic where some XX small fighter can like attach to the hull and just wipe you out. So there's going to be some balancing associated with that, and we're also like putting a lot of effort into what the ship combat, what is it going to look like? What can the blockchain support? There, like if you think about us wanting to do the game, well, no, we're building the game on the blockchain. You're not going to get 60 frame per second latency with current technology.
Right.
Maybe you can say layer 2 can solve that. Well, it's not that easy, right? So if with that constraint, what is meaningful combat? Is it turn based? Is it are we gonna just allow clunky latency and just kind of, or slower interactions? You're gonna have to charge up your weapon and then fire it. Like we're thinking through a lot of these questions because there's going to be ship combat. We're just trying to figure out how to build it so that it makes sense and it can be done on the blockchain. And but about ship balancing, yeah, we're gonna do some play testing, and we're gonna have to put a lot of thought into like
It's something that happens
one versus
long.
fleet interactions and just what makes sense, what's fun.
Yeah. So it's a typical game, like, probably things will change quite a bit, as the game launches and as we move forward and things of that nature. Yeah. Thank you, Chip.
A consideration when it comes to thinking of physics, and I've seen some of this come up in conversation, I believe in Foundation, about the different sizes of the alien species and their relationship to a ship that might be suited for them. There's the other considerations like the rainbow ships that are supposedly going to be a lot more efficient with their use of fuel and travel. Will that come into play? Or like the Calico Guardian that has hydroponics on board, does that reduce their food consumption for their missions? And can it actually become a profit center? I mean, like lots of things like that relate to ships that I'm curious about.
Yeah, that's the intent. And depending on how you spec out your ship, you can maybe a ship like a fighter ship will have some intrinsic tendency towards having better combat stats, right? But that doesn't mean a player can't swap out some of the combat related things, and spec it out more for some sort of like exploration with a little bit of a flavor of being able to defend themselves in combat. So there's going to be this player driven kind of customization. And as you swap out components and modules for the right things, your ship can get better at other aspects, like I mentioned, exploration or freighting or bounty hunting. Because maybe a bounty hunter you don't want to max out your firepower. You probably want a little bit of stealth, right?
Right.
But there's a give and take with everything. So that's the intent behind the modular customization of the ships with components and modules. It's how you spec out and make your ship better at one role versus another.
Mm-hmm. And the pressure's on, right? Because if you have to rebalance after people have already invested their time and invested their money, now that money's involved, there's going to be people who are a little bit more upset maybe than the average person. Do you guys have those dialogues as far as if we have to rebalance X, it's gonna be a shit show? I mean, is that?
Yeah, no, that we're well aware of that concern, and I think our approach is it's kind of we're forced in a position because we're already like public facing and we have real money involved that we have to have these incremental deliveries. But it also affords us the ability to release gameplay with simpler mechanics, balance that, add add complexity, balance that, and it's not as much of a shock when we have to balance things, because it's not like we released the entire complexity of the game fully polished and then we're having to change things. It's like we can do these step functions and balance it as we go, and it'll help address or mitigate that concern.
Awesome. So you mentioned briefly the lore. How much of the lore is there currently, and how much are you writing as you go? You said Bunthius was writing it as he goes. Are you in a position where you can talk about maybe something within the lore that you're really excited about?
Yeah, so the lore is, Danny's got the context of the game. Like, he has a timeline. We know where we are in the timeline, and we know where we're going. We know about the different races. We know about a bit about their identity and the factions. But it's still early. There's like the whole skeleton of the roadmap, and now we're like diving into the details, and Danny's been working a lot of that. We've hired writers and other content developers to help kind of flesh that out, and there's some exciting things that we have planned. But yeah, I would say the lore is broadly defined, and now we're getting into the details.
Awesome.
And I kind of I understand where our gameplay is positioned within the lore, and it's kind of cool to kind of, with the next deliveries, we're going to get more and more about where we are and what's going on, and we're going to tie it back to the lore, and that excites me. It's like storytelling, and it's really cool. So,
well, maybe we should jump into that then. So we're talking about Cream is really what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And for the people who may not be as in tune with Cream, a few sentences from your perspective of what Cream is and what you hope to accomplish with it when it launches.
Yeah, so Cream will enable supply chain logistics associated with mining, extracting resources from different celestial bodies, planets, asteroids, whatever, wherever, and then turning that into crafted assets. So players will start to be able to make components, modules, even start building their own ships, which is exciting, because then the whole economy goes closed loop. So right now it's open loop. We inject the ships, and players purchase those, but what we really want is players to build the ships themselves and then sell them to other players, and it becomes this closed loop economy with a little bit of injection of Atlas to kind of stimulate and inflate a little bit so that new players can come in, because we want the game to be affordable to enter and play and engage with the players, and if like Atlas goes to $30, that kind of inhibits that process. So that there's a little bit of injecting new capital to allow for more players to come in too. Cream, I guess I went a little long on that, but Cream is resource extraction, and crafting.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, we saw a bit of that new cash being injected this week with the Thimble Air Bike. Very cool new ship, and looking forward to the next ones coming.
Yeah, I really like the Thimble aesthetics. It's got that like grungy mechanical look.
Sure.
I'm excited for us to release more Thimbles. It's going to be exciting.
That thing is a rocket with a seat on it.
Yeah,
I love all the dials and screens on it.
Definite mad scientist vibes.
Do the physics work out with this bike? How does that work? But hey,
it's bordering on the fantasy, but it works out. I mean, the thrust is coming out one side, and you're going in
the other way,
the other direction.
Right.
The thrust vector is aligned with the center of mass, so it makes sense.
All right, cool.
So I've got another question for you, Chypto.
Yeah.
Has Meta already won the war? Written on the cargo container.
That's hilarious.
Is that post or pre-Meta? Facebook changing their rebranding.
Right. That's great.
Cool.
So So to that end, Chypto, in that picture, we saw the cargo ship there. When we see these concept art pictures, can we anticipate that these are other ships that might show up, or are they just an artist's rendition?
Honestly, like I think some of the concept art is artist rendition. It doesn't necessarily imply that everything in the background is gameplay. Like, but there are some Easter eggs in the backgrounds of these things, and I'll leave that up to speculation and interpretation.
Everyone's going to be digging through ArtStation today after that comment, right?
I think one of those Easter eggs is that female was a former employee of Facebook, and now she's just riding her thimble, unemployed as robots took over.
Exactly.
Spot on.
So, in relation to Cream, Chypto, I think we've got an abstract understanding of what it's going to look like for resource generation. Are you able to give a little bit more clear picture? I mean, do we stake a ship and it generates so much iron, or what is it going to look like, and how are we going to extract the resources, if you can say?
I mean, however a player gets access to a land plot, be it whether it's exploration or buys it from another player, they will have to stake a land claim on that plot, and then they have access to the extracting the resources within that land plot, right? So, and to continue to operate on that land, you're going to be paying, because you're in faction space, you're going to be paying rent associated with operating on that plot. So there's going to be a bit of an upkeep cost, but you'll be able to place down structures or construct structures on that plot. That's a power plant right there. And those structures will essentially allow you to extract resources, almost like you're extracting Atlas via ship staking. It's going to be a similar concept where you'll be able to extract just physical ore from the planet. And then that ore will get turned into, different metals and different technologies that will help build out eventually these ships. So it's pretty simple, but it'll be a very satisfying game loop. And some of the complexity will be the peer-to-peer markets. Like some players will be looking and see some dislocations in the market and like, that thing's way overpriced, or there's a lot of demand for that and I don't have supply. I'll go fill that. Or maybe I hold on to my certain resource because there's a lot of supply in the market now, but if I wait and list it when some of the supply has been diminished, then I can get a better price. So there's gonna be a lot of complexity just in operating within the marketplace. So even if mining is simple, it's not necessarily simple getting the best bang for your buck on selling and buying things. And I don't know how many of you played RuneScape, and I played WoW too, where there's a whole gameplay loop that people just dedicate a lot of their time to the marketplace.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this will be the first time that we really have players broadly interacting with other players. And will the resources live on chain, or are they going to be off chain?
On chain.
On chain. That's a lot of transactions. I mean, is every one resource its own transaction on the ledger?
Well, I mean, there might be certain game interactions that don't necessarily have to be on-chain transactions, but just like every ship exists on the chain, every resource will exist on the chain in some form or fashion, right?
Wow. And will the planets be specific to one resource? Will you have to stake on an iron planet and then a lithium planet, or will you be able to get a variety of resources from one planet?
Planets should have multiple resources.
Okay.
I don't think it makes sense for them to be like homogeneous. Maybe there's some particular asteroid that's like just pure iron, but a planet will be heterogeneous and have multiple things.
And will players be able to level up their claims at this time, or is that a future iteration?
Not ready to share exactly how your land claim progresses, because we're fine tuning some of those mechanics right now. But over time, there will be some sort of progression and expansion of your land claims that players can like aspire to.
And are you guys, without giving details, are you ascribing time or time and money to those upgrades?
Both, right? So
Both. Okay.
We want to reward the players that engage in the game, consistently and put time into it. but there will be an element of coming in and spending some money, and you can progress faster because maybe you bought from the marketplace the iron it takes to build this building rather than having to mine it yourself. I think that's okay because players are also want to have markets for selling the things that they've mined, right? So that the demand will come from some people who want to, build faster or just buy the resources quickly.
We have a question from the chat here. If you can answer it, how long do you think from the start of Cream do you anticipate the first ship being put on the market?
I won't give an exact time frame, obviously, but it should take time. Like it's a good chunk of time because if a player starts Cream and then is building ships within a few hours, the ships are just gonna inflate like crazy. So we have to put a lot of thought, and there's like a lot of this game, like not the game design is not necessarily just creating the mechanics and how you craft things, but also balancing the economy. So we're doing simulations and on like testing out a lot of iterations of our mechanics and then balancing it based on like batch runs of multiple players.
Yeah.
And, I think a question that's on a lot of people's minds is we've got this process that's rolling out with Cream, right? And we're not really staking into a 3D universe at this time. When the game goes live, if you have this information at this point, will we have to go out and find our planets again, or will we be allocated some planet that we've already been staking to?
Yeah, so full transparency, we're working on exactly how this will work, right? The one thing that I'm confident in is that the progression you have in your mini game should translate towards the Unreal Engine 5 experience. And we're working through exactly what it means when you stake land and build up all these I guess settlements on all these planets. How does that translate to Unreal Engine 5? There's little things here and there like we're not going to release the high risk zone and the medium risk zone and like immediately, right? So maybe some of this land is just in the security zone, and we can kind of sequester all of the land associated with this mini game into certain starter regions, right? So that is some of the things we're thinking through right now.
I think the importance of that question from my perspective is, many of the guilds, especially the larger guilds, are trying to understand how they're going to put their footprint into space, whether it's safe zone or the other zones. And if current decisions have an impact on future decisions that we just don't know about, that could create some tension down the line, right? We want our guilds members to be close, not spread out across the universe.
Yeah, I remember Funcracker posed this exact question multiple times to me. It's like, we don't want to engage in all these land purchases, but then the game comes out and our guild members are all over the place and we actually can't cooperate that well. It's like friction because we had no choice in where we placed our land. So well aware of this concern, and like our intent is to not have that problem when we do transition to Unreal Engine 5.
Fantastic. So you came on board to be a part of the shipbuilding piece, and I know they've announced, I think, 51 ships. Where are you in that process? Do you have your fingers on every ship, or are you more at a high level and then the designers go and design?
So Danny and some of our other team members, they manage the art pipeline. I'm not really involved in that. And so a lot of it is conceptualization, design language, getting the right metrics, because we also have to think about, the interiors of these ships are going to be navigated by these player sizes. So there's a lot of thought that goes there that I'm not involved in. The part that I am involved with is when we're ready to list these things to the marketplace and defining the loadout. Danny and I work together to define that. So
when you just had I don't want to call it a glitch, but there was a concern in the community about loadouts with the air bike, right? Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, so when we originally posted the air bike, we had a 0 for the missile bay and the weapons hardpoint, and understandably, like the community was like, well, what does that mean, right? It's confusing. What it was, and we removed that because we're just trying to we want to limit the confusion. It doesn't impact gameplay right now. But what it was we wanted to imply that when you manufacture the ship in the future, those other component slots will be optional. You can manufacture the thimble without those attached, but later on you can unlock the ability to attach those components.
And when you're
one of the things, one last point was that to lower the price point associated with that, we also removed the weaponry. And say if you attach the weapons, or it would be up to like a $20, $25 ship, most likely.
right.
So you're saying there's going to be a base price? Sorry, Banjo, for whatever weapon that would have been on there. So if it's $5, because now I'm just thinking like, so that's $5 if you jump, unless $20 wasn't the actual price. But what does that look like as far as like the price ranges for weapons?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think we have internally. We don't have metrics associated with this is the price of every component and module, because a lot of that is going to be community driven.
Sure.
But we did intentionally lower the price point of the thimble and got rid of the weapons, and now it's like a budget ship. But players through progression will be able to unlock the ability to add the weapons to their thimble air bikes.
Nice.
And with Cream, so we've talked about crafting ships. Are we going to be crafting components and modules as well then?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And another common question that shows up in the chats is, will there be a fail rate on building? Can you fail a ship?
I don't like that mechanic. Do you guys like that mechanic?
Well,
I don't.
What do you guys think?
Either.
Yeah, so I'm thinking on the R&D side of things. So there might be something additionally that you have to do because something fell through the cracks or wasn't able to be constructed right the first time, which would potentially take more from you, whether it's Atlas to buy the extra component or time to then go search to bring that part back, or more resources to refine. So it's not like you're going to hit the jackpot and get a legendary weapon to put on your thimble. It's not like that RNG, but I think because if we're talking about this being reality on some level, where the physics come into play, which is people make mistakes. So depending on if you did have all the correct ingredients to make this weapon module, let's say if it was that, there could be a percent chance where you're going to need to do a little bit more, where put more time in, I guess. But
I don't see pass fail as making sense, because again, if you're in the process of creating something, you may like, oh crap, I screwed this up, so I need more of this resource. So maybe the resources that go into the blueprint have flex, and if it worked out great, then it's really efficient. But then if you're also not very skilled at it, maybe that comes into play, whatever your skill is in this process as an engineer, perhaps. So you might use less resources for crafting that, but a complete fail to where everything's gone, that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, I've seen where there's that element of you can save reagents, like you have a percent chance of saving some reagents, which I think it would be nice as you increase your manufacturing skill. I'm concerned and I don't think this was the intent, but if you're crafting a ship and you're putting $100 of supplies into it and it fails and a player just loses $100, I don't think that's fun.
Right.
Maybe they had to pump in $2 more and fix the defect or something. But I'd have to put thought into if that would be a mechanic that would be worth investigating. I do think about, like, I played Elder Scrolls Online where you're upgrading armor, and you have to put in the upgrade reagents. And if you put fewer than required for 100% success chance, then it fails. But players are gambling, like, maybe I can save some of this upgrade reagent and gamble on an 80% success chance. But there's no real money tied to that. Now we're talking about real money. And if players are gambling, they're crafting, that might be a bit of a gray area. Right?
Yeah, and it might not sit well with the majority of people if they thought it was going to be $100, and now it's $102. Even though it's only $2, they're just
Yeah.
going to be like, "What? This is a sink. This is like an
why?
endless."
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I craft, I'm potentially going to have to pay up to $1 to $20. Or
But that kind of makes sense. I mean, no matter what you're
Sure.
building, if you're trying to restore a car or something like that, there's going to be unknown expenses, and sometimes, hey, this is the wrong part, I got to pay more. So I can see that working.
Just buy a
I think in
house, you'll
general,
find all kinds of unplanned expenses.
Right.
I think in general, it's not necessarily fun gameplay to fail a craft, right? But we are dealing with an actual economy, and so if this was needed to be instituted as a way to, kind of adjust the economy, and Star Atlas being as open as you guys are with the public, I think that would be well received. So I think it's a thing that we would probably want to shy away from, and then if you need to kind of go there a little bit, maybe you do.
I think that's a good point. There are economic levers that we're going to have to be kind of pulling, but maybe there's some elegance onto how we pull those levers or what they are. Like maybe we can adjust the emission rates of certain resources on planets. Say we're just pumping out too much of this.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room we can implement there, or maybe NPCs. It's like maybe if there's NPC sellers or tradesmen, like they can ask higher prices for certain things that you need to purchase from them. That would be what I would think would be the way we implement those economic levers, rather than this kind of failure rate or this kind of chance of having to spend more on crafting.
So will the 4 R's be part of the crafting loops too? Will people be able to do fuel, toolkits, food? Is that going to be part of Cream?
Yes. So it'd be, since there's going to be ship missions that players are going to be able to have to go on for certain things and certain progression that requires R4. We want that to be a player-generated resource as well. So it'll be cool because it's a closed loop, right? Players are sending out ships to explore land. Player stakes on land, creates R4, and it goes back into the ship missions. So it's quite nice how it'll work out.
So once that happens, will the actual infinite supply within the marketplace go away, or will player-created stuff be an additional option that may even lower the price of those resources?
No, we've talked internally about we won't be selling R4 at infinite rates because we want there to be an actual peer-to-peer market. The complexity there is how do we transition off of our infinite supply currently,
right?
And we're talking with our economists about how to do that.
So that
you brought up the magic word, Chypto, economists. So tell us about how it works with the economists on your team. Are they just oversight, or are they helping drive the underlying economy?
It's like a consulting model. They're partnered with us. They help develop some of our models. We give feedback, and it's like iterative. And we're also hiring like internal economists as well because we want to beef out that part of our internal team. So we're both. We have consulting services with third-party economists, and then we're building out our own economy team right now.
That's awesome.
That's one of the biggest things about these metaverse economies that are being created is that nobody's ever built one before, and that's one of the things I like most about your project is you guys, take it very seriously. Just every time you guys say economists, it just makes me feel a little safer.
I think like economy and community are the two biggest things for our game, right? If you don't have both, then you don't have a game that is like this true metaverse Web3 kind of gameplay experience that everybody's racing to market right now.
Right. Yeah, I would say out of all the projects that I've seen across the metaverse, and the thing that always drew me to Star Atlas is that it seemed to be building on a solid foundation of economics first, and then everything else is layered on top of that. And I think that's the way it really has to be if you're going to have longevity for what they're trying to create.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to go in a separate direction.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so there's when we think about blockchain games, and I don't know the answer. What is going to be the most successful? But there's the traditional big game companies that know how to make games, but they don't know how to do blockchain yet. And then there's like we're like fundamentally we're like focused on blockchain technology, and we're building a game. And eventually we meet in the middle somewhere on like metaverse experience, and we're hedging on like being the first to market on-chain gaming, and then we can, and we're working with third party, and we're building out our team too to have those like high AAA like fidelity experiences, but with the foundation of like the blockchain.
Right.
But I know that other AAA studios out there, they're thinking about, some of them are like NFTs. They're gonna have to catch up, because some of them are denouncing it, and eventually the community in the world is gonna be like, no, this is the future, this is what we want. They're gonna have to play catch up. But I'm sure there's studios out there looking into this, and they might have a head start on the whole like game studio infrastructure, but they might be like very nascent on the blockchain stuff.
Mm-hmm. And there's opportunities for other developers to create the back end to incorporate the two worlds, right? Somebody's going to come out and say, hey, we've got the product to turn your game into a blockchain, game.
Yeah.
One of the things, speaking of ships and earning, right now we're staking, everyone can stake their fleets. When we get to the fully realized game, will people still have the ability to manage entire fleets, or is it really just getting in your spaceship and flying, and you only have access to one of your ships at that time directly? I mean, not counting scholarships or anything like that.
So it's gonna be both. Like, you're gonna be able to manage your fleet from a high level, like merge a bunch of ships together into one group and then task them. But then a player will also be able to jump into their one physical ship and do more first person type interactions and have some sort of benefit associated with that. It'll be both. And I think, I've communicated this in the past, that the higher level third person interactions are going to dominate initially, because the blockchain limitations, it makes more sense to have RTS type interactions. But that doesn't mean we're not working towards those first person gameplay loops. Like, that's actually one of our priorities. Danny's always talking about how we want players to jump into a ship and engage with a certain crew station and like do first person interactions, and there'd be a reason for players to do that.
Well, we talked privately about Star Trek Bridge Commander, I think it's called, right? And it would be awesome to have a loop or something like a showroom where a group of guys and girls can get in there and maybe run a few game loops together before they are out in the fully realized space, right?
Yeah, Danny has mentioned things like that, like using that particular game as a source of inspiration for some of the experiences we're trying to foster.
Mm-hmm. And that hits the community piece, right? If you've now got a community of people who are trying to solve a goal together, over voice, getting stressed out, making mistakes.
And I love the idea of like somebody's like face being on the screens in the ship, and like as a commander, like commanding their
That's awesome.
players. Like, I don't know if we're gonna do that, but I would love to have something like that, especially when we start leading more into metaverse. I think that'll be fun, and there'll be so many memes, so many YouTube videos. Like, Twitch will be like, it'll be just great.
Tons of them.
I just want to ask a question about weapons. We did cover a little bit about that earlier, but will there be any swords of any kind? Are there going to be only projectile type of weapons? And, maybe not talking about specifically ships, but what you would carry on your character?
So, to be honest, I've been focusing mostly on ship weapons, but
Okay.
I do know like crew are going to have gear, and there's going to be weapon slots, just like that bounty hunter has a sniper. I wouldn't be surprised if we have some sort of like sword type weapons. I can't confirm it because I haven't seen any of that yet, but it wouldn't be surprising that we implement things like that.
Okay, because what's a Roman without a sword?
Exactly.
We have to have our citizenry out there to protect themselves in the event of anything. So Thanks.
So with with Cream coming, Chypto, and you already acknowledged that we'll be able to craft modules and components. Is that just for ships, or we'll be able to do that for the mining operations as well? And for the people who own mining operations, will they get some degree of airdropped crew or components?
I haven't heard about, because we airdropped them the poster holders. We airdropped them the miners,
Mm-hmm.
but then we're going to airdrop them more components and crew. I actually haven't seen confirmation that we're going to airdrop more, but also the intent is that like structures will have some sort of upgrade progression, whether it's higher tiers or some sort of like module slots that you can put in. I know we're going to allow crew to be in buildings as well long term, but that's not necessarily part of the initial Cream release. So yeah, I can't put a definitive answer on that particular question, but other than I do think ships will be upgradable, and there will be like modification slots and crew slots, and there'll be some fun gameplay there.
Yeah, I think where that question comes from is Wagner has said in the past that ship holders from the GAU are going to get airdropped their crew and their modules that are attached to those assets.
Yeah, I can confirm that. That's what we're doing. Yeah. But as far as extending that towards land structures and space stations and stuff, I haven't heard any chatter about us airdropping things associated with that.
With some of the questions that have come up around modules and components, the thing that continues to surface for me is I'm curious, has there been any thought given to are these components like hot swappable? I mean, does it mean you have to be in a spaceport? Can you actually have other modules and components on your ship that you can in space say, you know what, we want to retrofit things and hot swap things out? Or is that like you do it, it's going to take 3 days to module?
Pretty sure you'll have to be in a shipyard or a hangar to swap out components and modules.
Makes sense.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you can't have components and modules in your cargo, but you have to swap them. Like you need to be docked and like intentionally swap it out. It won't be hot swaps in space.
So it sounds like you're a gamer, or you've played some MMOs in your past. Are you using any of games for inspiration around the crafting?
I recently have played, like I've gotten addicted to Satisfactory and Factorio. Like those games are super fun. And I love the progression. Like Satisfactory has a lot of material sciences behind some of the progression. Like you think about it, a lot of it makes sense. You know, there's an element of suspension of disbelief on some of this stuff, but I really like how clean their crafting progression is. And using those games as inspiration. I also like the crafting system in No Man's Sky personally.
Yeah.
Like it's got like it's a nice blend of chemistry and sci-fi. Like I really like that, and I think that's another source of inspiration for us. So yeah, those are some of the games I'm looking at.
Yeah, I'm glad
Go ahead, Ray.
No, I'm just glad you mentioned No Man's Sky because of the epic failure of what it, the reputation of the game, but the gameplay was always something that I thought could be built upon, and now we're here. So,
yeah, I think we're at about 30 minutes left with you, Chypto. Would you mind if we just went rapid fire on some questions that we have for you? And
yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Let you jump at them. Okay. All right. Anybody else have a problem with that or want to get a question in that needs a longer answer before we jump?
We do have one in the comments right now. If any more characters or badges might be coming to the marketplace soon.
If I did know that the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be able to give it.
Yeah. Okay.
Or Chypto, we'll give you the opportunity to drop any alpha you plan to drop before we jump into the questions. Sure. If you have anything. If you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah, and these don't have to be yes or no. Just to preface this, if you need to elaborate, by all means.
Mm-hmm. I don't have my alpha usually comes out with good questions, so we'll just jump in.
All right, cool. You got it, man. Let's go. So we're going to start on Titans, right?
Okay.
So will Titan ownership be faction locked, or will a person from one faction be able to take their Titan to a different faction?
So this is kind of a touchy subject, to be transparent. I'd like to approach this question from more of like a discussion with you guys. So
Yeah.
I personally like the idea of Titans being faction locked. Like if you think about the Busan, the Last Stand, that is a lore-based historical asset. Like that the Sogmian race used that as a last stand to protect themselves. Should that be in the Visas or in the Mud sector? Like to me, I wouldn't necessarily like to see that. So that's my opinion. We are as a company we're discussing the mechanics behind Titan ships. But I know part of this question also relates to how should players use Titans, or how would they be used in the game? And I'd like to kind of pick some of your team's EVE knowledge and ask, what do you guys want to see? What's your opinion on this?
I have a few thoughts on the Titan. One of them, I absolutely think they should be faction locked because of the lore, because I mean, especially the size and design of these ships. But as something else we've also discussed on the show in the past is that, and you don't have to answer this as a question, but we're curious as to why they're being dropped in so soon, because we feel like these big beasts of a ship are such a deciding factor of power that they absolutely, if they're going to exist so early on, they should absolutely be faction locked, as to prevent someone from just going to Dutch auction and say, give me all three. I'm sitting here in ONI and now I rule the world. So from that regard, I think it's important to have them faction locked. And then there's still a lot of unknowns. Like, if we as a guild, let's say that Rome decided to pony up the funds for a big Titan, like, do we also incur like this $100,000 a month ongoing maintenance cost to keep this thing going? And what does it allow for us to do that we couldn't do with land purchase? So there's just so many unknowns around the Titan.
Well, I think that goes right into the question, Jesse, of what did developers, how do they think they're going to show up in the game? I mean, when they're going on auction this year, and there has to be some expectations of what people are going to do with it after they buy this big set of balls to drag through the metaverse, right?
Right.
From a gameplay perspective, I certainly wouldn't want us to release Titans and then it just becomes this force of unbalanced destruction associated with like land conquests and just destroying other people's assets. Like we're putting a lot of thought into these Titans and what they can do, what limitations are associated with them, how much they're going to be cost to upkeep. So without giving hard and fast answers, I just was curious what your opinions are, and like when Titans are introduced into the game, what will be their primary utility? Are they going to be these powerhouses for combat, or are they going to be like kind of bastions of defense for certain regions, kind of thing? Yeah. And they're really expensive to move around, kind of thing. I'd like to get your opinion.
Well, we've discussed. I can't remember if it was last episode or if we discussed it privately, but we talked about them being the instrument of boundary changes, right? So if a DAO or regional DAO or maybe in a faction DAO wants to adjust a boundary, you can expect that the Titans will be there either in a defensive capacity or an offensive capacity, because they have, well, I mean, we're theory crafting here, but they appear to have the firepower to at least hold a planetary system. That's my thoughts on it. And my biggest concern is the financial impact of them showing up.
Right.
I hope they are in game. I hope they are faction locked. I want to fly around one, but to me, it seems like it's a power struggle vehicle.
If we as a guild had one and we were to determine like what would we do with it, the things that I would suggest is I would say this is obviously going to be a home base. We already have the cost associated with it. It's going to be a home base for our guild. And we would probably, I think it would make sense to find a resource that we could utilize its muscle to protect while we harvest resources, be that in deep space, because if you have that kind of firepower, you're pretty much going to be fairly uncontested for at least a period of time. And so make use of that by leveraging it to gain resources that are hard to get to.
Yeah. As a end game type of ship, it would have a lot of impact on what people do. For example, if one guild doesn't have a Titan, but they want to go for a Dyson Sphere, the guild with a Titan could just stop them, ideally, if they want like to be the sole person to do that. So it gives a lot of power to those who are at the top, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I would think that just having any ship in particular doesn't mean that you would be better in any way, because I would like to see a skill based type of situation going on with what you have, or what you've purchased or what you've built. So you, just because you have it doesn't mean that any of these instances that we're talking about would be anything to worry about. Because but then again, going a little lower into the variables of it all, like Chip was saying, what is required, and and then also the upkeep, as we're talking about. Because if you can't use the ship and it's just there, then it would get destroyed essentially by an onslaught of just continual attacks. But the NPC crew could maybe only do so much compared to a human group of people. So it would be the humans operating their own ships would be the victors against the NPCs of that one person manning the Titan. So there's that balance. But skilled playing and utilization of assets would be the way to go, instead of just having something and being at an advantage.
I think that's everyone's fear is the decided advantage that it could have. And it'd be cool if part of the auction required that your Titan has to live out in high risk zone with all the other Titans, right? I mean, that would be that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Who's going to auction or put their money on the line at that level?
That raises the question, because there's a very important thing that guilds that have ships as resources need to at some point understand, and that is, what is the firepower required to contest a Titan, to contest a C11, to contest a Tree Arrow? So if you're going to have this asset, you should know, like, if you see this fleet of XYZ show up, you are now at risk. And also someone that is a faction as a whole. Otherwise, can you just stroll into some other faction with your ship that hasn't purchased a Titan and then just run amok? So it's going to be important to know, like, what is the limits of strength before a fleet of other collective ships can contest what you have.
I think the biggest question with that, what you just said, Jesse, is that nobody's going to really know for quite a while, after the game launch, what those mechanics are going to be, right? So a lot of people have a lot of money on the line, and then we're going to go out there and we're going to PvP and we're going to test each other and we're going to find exploits. And, the people who are in there early, some of those people are going to get hurt a little bit, so that's something that, everybody needs to be aware of.
That would be like sad but not funny, and kind of funny at the same time, if like 3 days after someone buys a Titan, everyone just wrecked them and that Titan's gone.
Oh man,
it would be terrible.
Yeah, and
I tend to think that just going back to the Titan bit, I tend to think that Titan should be more defensive and less offensive in capability, just for that reason. I think it should be rather hard to destroy one. I think you should be able to move with Titan and it kind of dominate a space, but at the same time going around and planet killing and things like that, I mean, that's kind of dangerous.
Well, it seems like a good first start, maybe the first year or two, is they live in safe space, right? They're not anything that can really kill you. You can't kill it. It's just a fixture and maybe feeds the lore of the metaverse before they start allowing it out into medium space and high risk space where it has some greater impact on the game.
Personally speaking, I think that is a good approach, because you kind of, if you just throw them in there and let people go at it immediately, and without having some sort of kind of trial period with PvP on a smaller scale, you're just asking for trouble. I think there's just a lot of unknowns we're going to have. So I think the assets like that, I think it'll make sense for them to be. And this, I'm not speaking like this is how it's going to be. I would think that they would be more defensive in nature at the beginning. They would be I almost think of them as mega structures that can move a little bit.
Right.
Because they're going to be mega structures that, you build up this planetary star system, you get a Dyson sphere, you get some other mega structure. There's going to be some upkeep costs associated with that, but it'll be lucrative from another standpoint as well. As it'll provide a lot of benefits. So maybe these Titans are kind of like mega structures that can move.
Well, you brought up megastructures, and I think that's another ambiguous topic that hasn't really been fleshed out in town halls. Things like Dyson spheres. Do you guys have a timeline? Like 2 years after we're live, we see our first Dyson sphere, or what? Because they are in other games. That type of project is instrumental to travel across the metaverse, right? Do you guys see a timeline for motherships and Dyson spheres before the launch of the game, or will it come afterwards?
I'd say that those mechanics come online around the time that we do location locked gameplay, where you're physically moving in space, physically taking territory on a 3D map. I don't think it makes sense to have that type of stuff until we release that. And it's well known, like it's known that on our roadmap that we're going to have some location unlocked gameplay first associated with minigame before we transition to this full 3D thing.
In many ways, I had hoped that would be the case with the Titans, meaning like it gave each faction something that as a faction they could perhaps work towards together, rather than it just being this thing that shows up. And I'm sure that as a part of the lore and development, there's some reason for bringing them front and center so early on. But I would have liked to have seen something that massive be a project that the faction worked towards.
Yeah, if we're gonna have like a big spaceship like this, I would just like to know that it's mortal, that it can bleed. Like if one dies out in space, it'd be like a whale dying in the ocean. All the little creatures would come for their piece of it. That would be really awesome.
And yeah, I think that would be great. And then also, I was just thinking as we were talking that there should, I would like if there was a human requirement for any of one of these Titans to even move. So it has the potential of moving, but there needs to be some like group or guild activity that you meet a threshold or you check off certain achievements where then you can possibly use it for anything, offense, defense, attack, or whatnot, not just from building it and then now you have it and you can operate and shoot and move and take it where you want to go within your faction if it's faction bound. But there needs to be right. There needs to be like
coordinated effort.
Exactly. Like a Herculean effort to operate this thing. It's not like a click and attack and it just destroys things. That's an interesting. I like that idea.
Expensive as well, right? It should be expensive to move it, one, and expensive to arm it. It should make people think twice around what they're going to do with it from an expense perspective before they actually, take action on something.
Also, another idea I had is that if guilds or VCs buying it for a particular guild to man and to earn a return on it for whatever reason, for whatever the purpose of a guild or an individual acquiring one of these through the Dutch auction, I think there should be a ranking of guilds that would qualify. So not just anyone could have the. I don't know. I'm just like theory crafting and talking out loud here. But if there was like a ranking system, although anyone could build it, it would take so much time where you probably wouldn't set forth on doing that with your minimal amount of players in a guild. But if there's a way that any one guild or for a ranking to improve over time, where it would made it possibly easier. But then I don't know, something about ranking of guilds and then them being able to do X, Y, Z in some way when it comes to Titanship.
Well, like here's an idea, and we're just theory crafting now. So maybe some of you guys have played Stellaris, where to get certain assets or certain things in the game, you need to upgrade your starport or star base, and so maybe to even craft a Titan, your guild needs to own the star system and build up the infrastructure, and maybe you need a mega structure alone to even craft the Titanship, right? Like this giant shipyard. That it takes just a Herculean effort just to get to that point, and then somebody needs to have the blueprint, which will be an effort in and of itself, and then all the resources to build it, and it might take a while for this thing to be built. Like people will be watching it. Take this, like start from a skeleton and over months, be built. I think that would be really cool.
Also, and that makes it this thing that now is created from people who are actively engaged in the gameplay process. For it to even be able to bear fruit.
Sorry, Jess. I thought you finished when you were talking, but I did mention in a previous episode that before a Dutch auction of anything this year for Titans come out, there should be an effort amongst the community to work towards building one out once we have cream and we're able to harvest and acquire resources. So it's not just bam, someone bought it, but there's a productive effort amongst guilds that would foster more engagement and more activity in the market, and to build out the economy, I guess, in that way. So now like we were just saying, there's that long-term effort, seeing it being built or having a bar, whether it's 0 to 100% of how far along a guild is getting, with just the resources within its wallets that are cumulative in the organization when that's live. So it's just like a live tracker of resources if they decided where you're capable of creating one.
Like a faction initiative or something where you guys have to pool resources to unlock certain content. That's pretty neat. But I would say on this topic, if like the community doesn't like something, like I encourage community to like speak up and make that known, right? I hear you loud and clear. I have my own opinions on this. But yeah, I would encourage you guys like ask the questions to the team at large and poke at it, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I like this idea on the screen here. I think that's a great idea. I'd like to see it sold as a blueprint. That way there's still a mechanic involved where it's being built out, and it's not this thing that becomes immediately disruptive to both gameplay and the economy. You know who has it, but you also understand that there's this build out process.
And also the optics of it too, from the outside, the legacy gamers coming into the space. If there's already all this, ship and power that a guild has, whether we have the Real Engine 5 out or not, it would deter people from coming and even trying to even get involved.
Yeah. Personally, it never occurred to me that the Titans would be sold. I always kind of figured that they would be crafted. So I definitely agree with Ronald there on that one. And then Monty made an interesting comment earlier about human crew only. I don't necessarily agree with the idea of you have to have all humans playing a ship of that size, but I know we've talked in the past about there being an advantage to having more human players versus NPCs. Perhaps there's a percentage, like you have to have so many humans to be able to operate a Titan, just to kind of balance it out a little bit to where it has to be a bigger communal or guild effort.
That's a cool idea. I do like it that there's a minimum like human interaction required to do certain things.
Otherwise, could you imagine like one person and his NPC crews just cruising around in the Titan?
It's just Elon or Gates driving around their Titan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are people out there that have that kind of money though, where they could kind of fracture a game. I mean, I've seen it in the past with some of the like more sandboxy type games where people were able to buy certain things and pay to win and dominate.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to see as it happened in EVE Online when the Titans were introduced. It was like such a gargantuous achievement to get one, and then it became commonplace now with every war. It's just like that's the number one ship in mass that you just see with like lasers. And it's like kind of gets ridiculous.
Yeah. So speaking of legacy gamers, we know that there's going to be a transition when the crypto community starts it all out, and then we try to get the legacy gamers in. How complex do we anticipate flight being, especially combat flight, right? So we've got different examples of games that we can pull from, and some are very basic where you just point and click and kind of move around, and some have you all the way down to moving power around to different systems in your ship. How in depth do you anticipate you guys going?
So I've spoken near term is going to be like an RTS, but I have heard Danny mention that like he likes the feel of Star Citizen's flight, and that could be a source of inspiration for us. So that's as best as I can answer it right now, as far as like maybe a long-term goal for us.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to learn what it means to fly with the joystick versus a keyboard. It in some of those games, it absolutely requires a level of skill that keyboard warriors don't have right now. It's a joystick game, and I'm just curious. I haven't played Star Citizen, so I don't know. But is it keyboard or joystick?
It's I think it lends itself towards keyboard, and I've only watched players play it like Twitch streaming, so I think it's both.
Got it.
Yeah, when the racing gameplay loop enters at whatever point, I would hope that at some point it becomes very tactile and joystick oriented. That would make the racing a lot more fun, not just from the aspect of the person in the seat racing, but also the spectators and all the speculation and all the other things that will go into that sort of thing.
Yeah, like some of the thoughts are some of those kind of real-time interactions, they don't necessarily occur on chain. Like you go into this kind of instance, duke it out, and then the result gets posted or broadcast on chain, right? So we could potentially do that with combat. We could do that with racing. I think that there will be some like technology and designing around the limitations associated with things like that.
You mentioned racing. Sorry, Benjamin, did you want to move on?
No, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so when it comes to racing, there's games like Pegaxi and the type of games where it could be a 2D. You see your ship kind of moving along your screen against others, and then like, is there any type of where are you guys maybe in the development stage of that, and do you have a significant role in what the racing aspect of the game is going to look like?
We have racing on our timeline, and it's part of like our intended future release, but we haven't been developing that out yet.
Sounds good.
So one of the things that was brought up, or at least alluded to, is that Cream might include faction NPCs. Is that accurate? Like getting quests from NPCs?
Yeah. There'll be NPCs with give quests.
And will we start building loyalty at that time? Will it start driving the loyalty that we've seen in some of the ship documents that have come out recently?
When the dependency on ship crafting and a lot of crafting does depend on the loyalty system, so those will be like, there'll be a dependency there. When that gameplay comes out, there will be ship loyalty associated with it.
And is there a way for, let's say, an ONI person to gain loyalty in Cream, the initial version of Cream, with other factions, or will it only be interfaction?
So whatever ONI has access to based on the aligned company document, that'll be the initial like exposure to what they can build, and then faction passes get implemented. And if you want to unlock more access, that'll be the mechanism for doing so. But like, I do think that even if you buy the faction passes, like it's still going to be an effort to like unlock all those blueprints, and you might be at a disadvantage because your faction doesn't have access to all the resources, or as high abundance of the resources that are required for those blueprints. So it's like, great, you have access now. Now you're going to be buying that at a premium, the resources at a premium off the marketplace to build those ships. Whereas the factions that's their native companies, it'll be easier for them.
And is loyalty one direction? So, for example, if I can gain loyalty with everybody, or can I lose loyalty with working with one faction against another? So,
the bi-directional loyalty stuff, that's more like there's loyalty associated with getting blueprints, and then there's like faction standing kind of thing. I think those are slightly divorced, right?
Okay.
So I do think maybe there's faction standing, especially when you start doing the risk zone, banished faction type stuff that can go in multiple directions. But I don't think you accumulating points with peers would impact your standing or your loyalty points with like Calico or another manufacturer, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, there is a way you could get into that, because I'm sure like the Ecos people are not happy to be working with people who support peers, right? I mean, that you've got somebody who's, I guess, peaceniks through bombing, but then against somebody who might be more military minded. It seems to me down the line there's an opportunity to put that in place somehow.
I agree. I think the interesting dynamics will be with the banished factions, and that'll be where like I don't want to talk too much on that because that's risk zone kind of fun gameplay that we're keeping in our back pocket for now. Don't want to ruin some of the awe associated with experiencing it for the first time. But that's where a lot of the interesting stuff will play out. I don't think the inter-faction and the like faction native manufacturers are going to be the ones that have these complex rep dynamics.
Well, you called them banished factions. So that's a little bit of an alpha, I think.
They've been. I don't think I'm the first person to say that, but that's what we have them named as. They're the banished factions.
Cool. Yeah, outliers. They're not a part of the main sector for sure. With the ships and the blueprints, one thing that comes to mind for me is like it would be interesting to have blueprints for ships that are provided as a loyalty. So in other words, if I'm a ship manufacturer and I'm like building any one ship that I can get a blueprint, get my hands on, that's a little bit different than if I'm trying to get a blueprint. I only manufacture these ships. So therefore I have some loyalty to this ship line. And so therefore I get access to these blueprints that are specific to the ship line because of my loyalty.
Yeah. And I personally, so here's the alpha I'll drop, right? About this because it's been on my mind a lot. With blueprints, I'm leaning into the idea that say you unlock a specific ship blueprint, that blueprint itself has a progression associated with it. So it's not just one and done by the blueprint and now you build the X4. It's like, well, you can keep investing into that blueprint and it gets better over time. I think that'll be really interesting. So that way, some people specialize in this one ship, not necessarily just a manufacturing line, but a specific blueprint. And then I don't think we've talked much about this, but blueprints aren't only ships. There's blueprints for other things in the game.
Modules, components.
Yeah, things like that.
So when it comes to blueprints, is there going to be percentage chances of you getting it, or is it required after you've done a certain action? Is there going to be a mixture of both, or randomized asteroid harvesting blueprint? Wow, I got one.
I think there will be a guaranteed way to get a blueprint. So you purchase a blueprint for this price, but some blueprints might be like locked behind other content that could be random. Like go, I don't know if it'd be this simplified approach, but like in WoW, you go kill all these mobs and you'll get a chance at a drop. Maybe you go kill a bunch of these pirates and sometimes they drop a blueprint. Who knows? I think that'd be fun too.
Yeah, because I'm thinking maybe there's blueprints you can only get through storyline, through an adventure mode storyline that would also help you in your PvP, because now you have the intersection of people who just care about PvP having to do PvE, and then PvE needing to go out there to progress within the adventure mode if they never wanted to, because you have a lot of people on the side like yourself, may possibly if you're not that PvP type of guy, but you want to, and you're that hardcore adventure guy, it's going to be like you can't really enjoy adventure that much because you'll still be able to complete it maybe, but you're not going to have that full experience of adventure if you don't dabble in the second or third zone.
Some solid PvE incentives
to get some blueprint that's required to you to fulfill the full walkthrough or playthrough of the adventure.
Well, I'm already aware of one ship that we're keeping for like content unlock. Cool. And I love this ship, so like I'm excited for when players discover it.
Can you give us the first letter of the name of the ship? Can you give a color of the ship?
No. But I know this ship, people will love it. It's one of my favorites. So,
can you paint for us maybe a little bit, Chypto, what it's going to look like for PvE in safe space? Are there going to be pirates? Are there going to be faction forces? What can we expect to go up against if we're not a PvPer?
So if you're in the secure zone, like you're secure. I don't think that there's going to be very rare instances of PvE, if any. When you venture out into the lower security zones, that's where you will have those random encounters with the Jorvik and the Ecos, and eventually you'll run into the Tufa in certain instances, that'll be it's almost like NPCs scattered around the place, and they'll be roaming, and you'll run into them, and you'll either engage them or flee them, and there'll be drops associated with that. one idea that I've seen thrown around the Foundation Room, and I like it. I don't know if this will actually make it into the game, but I really like this idea. Is like area bosses, so like these giant
That's
like
cool.
NPC
Yeah.
monsters, or even like souped up pirate ships that would be really cool to have fleets kind of, take out. And I don't know if we like the respawn mechanics, like how do we handle that? Because we don't just want it to like just appear out of nowhere. Like I don't know. I don't think we're going for that level of unrealism or whatever the word is. But I like the idea of like space monsters and world bosses and stuff like that. It's like the MMORPG experience, right?
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm sorry, I'm just biting at the bit to just say something. But maybe there's a beacon that you can acquire from adventure or from, finding it, and then you don't know what it's going to bring or call into that region or faction.
Yeah.
So it's not just respawning over X amount of time, this new monster or same monster that looks the same way, because that could get redundant and then tedious if it gets stronger and stronger every time it's defeated. Like that could be another component where now it requires even more people, more humans or NPCs or more ships that you need to purchase and to upgrade. So now this continual monster, if we want to call it that does come back, it grows and grows to this thing where it's always going to be there, not necessarily destroy anyone, but it could probably consume and affect the planet's resources and whoever owns that planet. So you'll get rewards for destroying the monster, but the larger it grows, and now it impacts that environment of maybe the planet you own, and now you have to move. And what happens to the planet? There could be some. So beacons that you don't know what's going to come, and then you guys could get even more creative, and you can have an onslaught of just ideas to work with.
Well, I guess one last point on this is like one thing I've been thinking about is maybe you do find one of these beacons or one of these locations of these monsters, and you're like, I'm no way equipped to handle this. Well, you can like tag it and then go and sell that on the marketplace. Like this is information, and then somebody can buy that and go like take it out, whatever, or guilds can buy it and go take out these world bosses. But at least the person who is exploring has, they're rewarded for their efforts, right?
Yeah. Right. And then also you can sell it or use it to potentially disrupt something like a Titan being built. You could just open it up somewhere like in a different faction on your second account. You just you take your X4 or your jet, your Opal jet, and then or whichever one that has warp drive, and then you can just like open it up in someone else's, and then it's just like leave.
Open Pandora's box and run.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
One of the other pieces that we've heard are coming to ships, Chypto, is charms. Do you have any information on charms at all?
It's another slot. Like there's components and module slots. Now there's going to be a charm slot, and there will be you equip your charm. There'll be a certain buff associated with it. It's just another flavor of a ship slot that you can equip things.
Mm-hmm. But would a pet classify as a charm, or would that be a crew member?
I think that's a crew member. You'll have crew slots. Pets might have their own particular slot. We have so many different modular slots. It's going to be really interesting how it's going to be complicated. Like there's going to be a lot of customization, a lot of like agency the player gets to build their ships and their fleets whatever way they want.
That's awesome.
I do have a question. So the lore of the game, how flexible is it to incorporate a well thought out lore of a particular guild that wants to more or less have their guild's lore work with or within the lore of the game in some way, not to maybe be added on if it adds so much value and enrichment to the game and how it could be built out. Like, is it a fixed thing where there's no chance of anyone creating a lore to add on or to have it be a part of?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a guild gets to a point where they could be their own banished faction. I don't know. Like, I like the idea of it. I don't think we've actually planned that particular instance of happening, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. I think that could be something we enable, right?
Have you heard about Rome's relationship with Gala?
I've seen tidbits of it.
I think we're a banished faction there. Chypto, we are at 90 minutes. I want to make sure we're respectful of your time. Do you have a hard stop? Or?
Yeah, I think I have to hop off at this point. Got other plans for today, but this has been super fun, and I would love to come on at some point in the future again and talk more about the development since from now till then. Yeah, man, this was a lot of
And
fun.
even
90 minutes just flew.
Yeah, and even if it's not to even drop any alpha and share any thoughts, just
Right.
to have you on here to participate in the theory crafting side is fun.
Yeah,
We've enjoyed having you for sure.
yeah, it
Well-
helps because like it's like a sounding board for ideas too. Like
For sure.
just
Well-
hearing some new ideas here is like just fuels kind of our development.
And to
We like
that
to
end,
have
if-
I was just gonna say we'd like to have a revolving door with all of our previous guests. So feel free to reach out anytime if you want to hop on. Even if we're live stream, we've had some of our old friends come in, so it's all good.
Yeah. To that end, I think if you wanted to do a full theory crafting episode with an agenda that's written by you, we can get the
Right.
community involved in a big way. So I think that would be fun.
Yeah, that sounds like something that we can make happen. But yeah, this has been super fun. And yeah, I love all the community feedback. Everybody loves these talks, so I'm sure we'll do more in the future.
You got
So-
it, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You're our first Star Atlas developer that's been on, and I think we nailed it. We of course would love to have others, but you're a guy who really seems like he's in the weeds and really loves to talk about this stuff openly on the spaces and the town halls. So we're very happy to have you. Have a fantastic day. And then for the rest of the listeners, we're going to stay on and talk some more. So please feel free to stay with us, excuse me. And if you want to find Chypto on Twitter, he is at Chypto_.
Yep.
And I think
Chypto was taken.
and then I think on Discord, he goes by Chypto. I think you can search for Chypto and find him there. But of course, you can find him in the Foundation room on Star Atlas Discord. Continuing on these very same conversations. So thanks for coming, man.
Thanks, guys, and
Thanks to the team as well.
yeah, appreciate it. And yeah, shout out to the Star Atlas team too.
Yeah.
All this stuff's it's
For
not
sure.
just me; it's everybody. So
All right.
we're working hard. We love the community feedback. Thanks for all the questions having me on, and you guys have a good rest of your Sunday, and we'll be talking.
You too,
You got it,
Drew.
man. Take it easy.
Talk soon.
Later.
Well, that was fantastic. That
Good
was
stuff.
that was great.
That could have gone on for hours.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Me and Ray were crying backstage,
Yeah.
looking at the time like, oh man, it's
Yeah.
over.
Tear emojis all over the place.
Yeah, so
And it's-
we had a series of questions that we had lined up before, but man, of course, those spawn all kinds of other ones, and it was hard. Just like, oh, dear, I'm gonna ask this too.
Well, I agree, Jesse, and it's kind of hard to take a list of questions and not let the we let the conversation go where it goes.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we do here.
Right.
But you know what we might do is we might take some of those questions and just talk about them amongst ourselves.
I think it's great.
You do that.
We've got a little bit of time. Is everyone okay with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think one of the ones that we didn't get to, let me just find a good one.
Well, I had one that wasn't answered. It was how good is Tufa camouflage going to be? So if a data runner is going past, would it see it? If a normal ship is going past, would it be able to like sense it? Or if like a small ship, would it just be completely invisible pretty much?
I
Very
think a
specific.
data runner would see it because the data runner seems to be at the high upper echelon of data, so it should be able to see it. As where if you had something else like a jet or even I mean even who knows, maybe even a hero, I don't know, something where they're probably not going to be as equipped unless they went out of their way to install the modules and components that give them that extra scanning.
Yeah, I think it's all a proximity thing, right? So like an OPOD might even in hyperspace be able to sense the TUFA in the system, if you will, where a smaller ship might have to be right on top of it before it can sense it, which is the advantage of something like an OPOD because you have distance as a defensive
Right.
mechanism, right? But if I mean, a TUFA sitting in an asteroid field, having now gotten into some games where you're flying through those, you would never know. I mean, there's just no way visually to make one rock look like or look different than another one, right?
And then maybe there's an aspect of the TUFA where your skill based on flying it in the way that you use your stealth, or maybe it's been upgraded in a way that has extra stealth. So maybe even if the data runner gets a ping of a signal for it, it knows one's in the region or a ship is in the region, but it can't exactly isolate exactly where. So it's probably something like that. That'd be cool.
And that's a mechanism that you see in a number of games. When you make a hyperspace jump into a system, you automatically do a scan for what's there. right? To see what's out there, because in a game like Eve, if you don't do that, you're likely to get killed ultimately. So again, it will be curious to see, for those of us who own TUFAs, where you'll sit in some sort of ambush potentially. How are you going to monopolize and maximize your ship to make money and grow your ship? I think there's so much opportunity there.
Right.
Because I'm thinking, in order to do we have to get our ships to the shipyard to upgrade it? Because how are you upgrading a TUFAs if they're just hanging out all day? In this asteroid belt. So they're not always going to be a static group of TUFAs. If it was that one purchaser of 3,000 TUFAs, they would have to move around, and you would probably have a chance to go through that same area and not experience an ambush every time.
Well, I agree with that, but wouldn't you want to be the guy with 3,000 TUFAs making his own asteroid field? I mean, how awesome would that be?
Absolutely.
That's the most awesome.
Like, hey, it's a planet, and then it just transforms.
So what do you guys think? Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, I was going to say something that he said that got me thinking about, like, how blueprints, that in his world, and this is not to say this is going to be a part of the development process, but maybe that blueprints wouldn't just be this static thing, that once you have the blueprint, you're able to create this data runner. So maybe as you become more skilled as someone that can utilize this blueprint, or you've built it a number of times, all of a sudden maybe an extra component or module slot or something, kind of like, how when you have a car line, there's like higher levels of car within that car line. Maybe you can create a better data runner because you have that experience as a shipbuilder.
I agree with that, Jesse, because in my mind, a data runner, I'm thinking you're going to be able to go out there and scan planets and find out like what kind of resources are on this planet versus another. And so if you're able to have that kind of capability on a whole planet, you would think you'd be able to do something to be able to see what's inside of a TUFA FICE. Just because it's, a meteor on the outside doesn't mean that's what it is on the inside. You should be able to tell that. And so I think, like you guys were saying earlier, the ones that don't have that level of technology, obviously, even if they're a large ship, they probably can't scan that well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. What did you guys think of the resource conversation? I had this image in my mind of what it was going to look like, and I think I have a different image of what it's going to look like now. How do you guys anticipate that you'll show up? Are you just going to stake all your land in one spot and draw resources, or how do you hope to approach the game?
A clue that came of what he was suggesting there, and again, this doesn't lead to anything being exact, but it sounded as if land might only open up first within the safe zone. So if that's the case, I mean, grab land wherever you can, unless there's some other thing that says, hey, you can scan for land, and that in this region, there's more likely going to be the resources that you might want to have. So that's where you're going to get your land. But if we don't know, and it's just a straight up, a grab for land, then it's grab land, unless we have any new information that says why this land over that land. Yeah.
Yeah. I think from a resource perspective, we've had conversations in the past about, okay, I have $10,000. Am I going to go in Polis or am I going to go in land? And it's starting to feel like you might need to lean a little bit more into land. Polis is going to have an emission tied to it, but it may not be as good as we think. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get the gun on crafting, you almost have to, by nature, have the resources available. And anyone who's done any sort of crafting in a game knows if you get your own resources, it's way cheaper.
We have a news slide that if we get to it, we'll share it. But the whole concept is around that last year, 2021, in the metaverse, there was 500 million in land sold, and the anticipation is 1 billion this year. Any way you slice it in Star Atlas, I think land is going to be of significant value. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's high on my list. I'd say it's number one priority, even for what I plan to accumulate from here. I feel like I'm solid in the Polis, solid in the ship assets. I really want to settle some land.
Yeah,
I think you made a good point there, Jesse, because you're solid in the Polis as well. Because I think the Polis is going to be the governance. So having land without having any Polis is going to be a bad move, also, right? So there's going to have to be some sort of a balance between the two. Mm-hmm. I agree with you guys probably as far as leaning into land in the short term before the governance part comes into play so heavily. But later on in the game, if you have a piece of land and you get overtaxed or whatever because you don't have enough Polis to defend yourself, that's going to be a political play that's going to be happening.
And Wagner's been pretty clear that the DAO, the Polis DAO, is the top level DAO. We won't see faction DAOs and regional DAOs for some time. Monty put a question into chat that I think is probably worth talking about because it was new information, right? And the challenges of the game being on a blockchain is it introduces latency through approvals, which may make real-time combat a challenge that they're going to have to solve. I don't think this is surprising, but I think it's important for the community to know.
Yeah. As someone that has been kind of feel sensitive to that as each day when I have to go through and have to prove every single transaction for everything that's happening with ships and claims and this and that, my guess is, and of course, the more that you have a need for this, which there is, the metaverse will provide. There will be, the development ideas, thoughts, and resources will lean in this direction. My guess is that when you enter a combat area, you will probably at that point have to make an agreement contract-wise, and then it does its thing and making sure you have the necessary resources and things, and then settles up thereafter so you're not constantly engaged in this approval process for transactions.
I was surprised that resources are going to be on chain because that's, to me, feels like something that should be off chain, because if you're moving 10,000 of ore, whatever ore, and you sell half and you have to establish that on the chain and hundreds of thousands of people are doing it at the same time, that's really going to put a lot of throughput, transactions per second, on the Solana blockchain. I think Star Atlas is going to test the chain continually if that's the case.
I agree with you on that, Banjo. That's something we've looked at with other games in the past, is how much do we actually want to have on chain versus how much is going to prove the gameplay to not have certain things on chain. So, your ship gets destroyed or gets damaged. Obviously, that needs to be on chain. You get a resource, okay, that can be on chain, but shooting missiles and things like that, that's going to really clog up a blockchain if you really start trying to nitpick.
Yeah. As someone was talking about things they're worried about, the thing that keeps coming to my mind, and I would bet big money it's going to be a thing at some point, and that is exploits. We've seen exploits in every game out there, every MMORPG, anything that's multiplayer where people are able to use bots or whatever else. There is some form of exploits. Well, now that there is, real money at stake here, how quickly do you identify these? How quickly do you plug them? And what is the potential risk for things that you're not even considering? You go into deep space, you're there for the regular gameplay, but someone has identified an exploit that's able to take advantage of other people.
Well, I think that's going to come through the blockchain itself. I mean, there's going to be people who are blockchain savvy who will code something to know when somebody jumps into this system and where they're at and how they can take advantage of that, whether by scalping them or always staying away from them. I think every guild that wants to play at the end game has to be ready for those types of tools and systems and roll with them. I don't think you can fight against them.
I think that's going to go all the way down to people being able to track wallets and see where you're engaging, and people having to have multiple wallets to be able to move around freely. I mean, I think it's going to get kind of complex.
It could even be some strange, silly thing like you're out in deep space and you go to barter something, and they've written into it where, in addition to what you've bartered for, they actually just also offloaded all of your fuel, so you're stuck there in deep space. It could be little simple things written into contracts, some strange way on chain. We don't know what they will be yet, but we've seen them. We've seen crafting exploits, fishing exploits in some games. They're going to be there. It's a part of the growing process.
Just the botting alone. I haven't played an MMO that doesn't have bots for crafting. And I know this has been brought up on some of the town halls and they're going to work against it, but I just don't know how much energy and money can you apply against something that somebody has got a vested interest in doing, right? So at some point, I think we're going to see it, and we may end up having to do it ourselves. I mean, it's one of those things where sometimes it becomes part of the game style. Fancy, I think you said there was some new stuff on Twitter that popped up today.
Yeah, just before our stream started, they uploaded something, and wow, check this.
Wowie.
So this is a point of view from the showroom. It looks like you can might be able to just walk up to this and buy the ship. But yeah,
What do we think for scale? Like, I mean, it looks small right there, but does that mean it's small? Is that like a one-seater?
If it's even a seater at all, right? We don't
Yeah.
know.
True.
Or I mean, is it a drone? We've seen. I've never seen this model of drone, but we have seen the other one that kind of has like 4 legs. Kind of, we've seen it hanging off of the
The whole
C11
tank.
and
Yeah.
in some art. Yeah.
well,
So maybe
unless
it's
someone, I guess someone could be like flying like flat in the middle of it, but I don't see much room for a cockpit there.
Right.
Actually, I think we have seen this before. Now that I think about it, there is a picture of a drone tower with a bunch of drones flying outside of it.
Huh.
I'm almost certain that's the same picture. While we're talking, I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, I seem to recall this because we didn't recognize it then either, but we saw
Mhm.
a bunch of them around the building or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Rob Mega and PG from the chat. They're thinking that's a weapon, and so maybe that's a module, or maybe it's a drone weapon, which we haven't seen before. Because you can have attack drones as well as data drones, and I think we've probably only seen data drones at this point, right?
And that's
Yeah,
the other thing. This is the showroom, and so the showroom doesn't only show ships. Maybe that's someone checking out modules, like you're saying. Yeah.
We have seen data drones before. You can see them on this one. They're like
Right.
on I want to say the moon just because it's grey, but it's probably not.
And the Visas Opod has them as well. Like I think that we had a picture before of the Visas Opod having some data drones flying around it or something, didn't we?
It's not on this one. It's the only Visas we got at the moment.
Oh yeah.
So
But
I
you saw
found
them on the
picture-
bottom, on the belly of it, and then I think they had one where they were a couple of them were out or something.
Yeah.
I got to delete a picture out of here to load. I found the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, but it's a cool perspective, and it reminds me a lot of one of the last showroom pictures we've seen, where it's looking at an X4. If I can find it.
Yeah, while you pull it up, there seems to be a description on the. There you go. So on the previous video that was just released today, when it's at that max angle at the end, there's a description. I'm thinking on the far right, bottom right of the screen. So whoever can enhance that, get back to Rome. We'll pay you handsomely.
So here's the drone tower, right? So they kind of look like that, but not quite. I mean, they kind of have the.
It's not very
Maybe
pointy.
this is the inspiration.
But yeah, perhaps a variation of that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which
gonna-
begs the question. So in this particular instance, are these things just doing what they do as a part of whatever the instruction is from the ship, or are you able to give specific orders for what a drone does? One thing we didn't touch on in this particular call with Chip that we have heard mentioned in the past, and I don't know if this is going to be a part of gameplay, but it was mentioned that there would be potential threats, PvE threats to your mining claims. So, you could actually have things that roll up on you. So is that a way that you defend yourself from such things?
Yeah. Imagine if they had those in Avatar, right?
Right.
No, it makes sense to me. And if they're going for true realism and eventually a terrestrial gameplay loop, it seems to me that you would have stuff that could attack your base. You're on alien worlds. There has to be aliens. That not every planet is going to be without species. So I imagine, and maybe you pick the world that's light on species and it doesn't hurt you, but maybe you pick the wrong damn world and you get attacked every single day. I think there would be some cool variability in there to put that in there.
Right.
Fancy,
So-
you got some other stuff?
Yeah, there was also a roadmap report this week. It's just a continuation of last week, but an update pretty much. And ship had terminals, look, dev first draft complete, in engine using placeholder art, and a Hall of Leadership statues built out. Those are the things I found most interesting about it, really. I was wondering what the Hall of Leadership could be.
Yeah, the
And,
statues to me seemed something that piqued my curiosity. And it looks like you can see it up in the top left there, right?
Yeah, just the bottom half. Oh well, yeah,
So-
people can see it.
Being that
Yeah.
this is the showroom, maybe that is an opportunity for when you to be specific about picking a race. You get to go and learn about each of them, see their size, see them up close and personal, the same way you're doing with a ship.
That makes sense. I like that idea.
Yeah. and to take a look back at all the other views we've seen from the showroom over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I find it amazing that people's introduction to this game will not just be it's on Solana's beta network, and well, like they're going to be able to come in here onto the showroom and just use their imagination and follow along with the development of the game via Foundation or just via or through guilds, and it's just going to be a way better. It's going to be much more sticky of a game where the retention rate of people are gonna be much better.
For sure, yeah.
And they've been showing some pretty interesting work in progress stuff in the foundation room, the stuff that we can't share.
Yeah.
There's definitely some cool stuff coming. I think we got exposure to a ship that's coming that just looks out of this world. It's almost impossible to tell what it was.
So stay tuned in to Rome to figure that out.
Fancy, that's a good video to show for the picture. I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Just rounding off all the things we've seen and starting to stack up, get quite a lot of perspectives.
Yeah, I was curious personally to know what games we weren't able to get to that question, but what games in the NFT gaming space does Chypto? Which ones is he following? Is he involved in any other games, and what takeaways or lessons is he learning from other games in the crypto space? I think that would have been a great question. Maybe next time we'll ask.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for you guys in that regard, because I know that we develop some game bias based on the ones that we choose to focus on, the ones that appeal to us most. But is there really anything across the landscape in all of metaverse gaming, GameFi, blockchain games, that you think is developing equally a foundation for the metaverse the way that Star Atlas is? What is there a close second? Is there anything that really is laying the foundation like that?
I've seen a bunch of different projects out there, and I don't think there's any that are very clear in their ultimate goal, like Wagner has been. There are some space games, but they don't advertise them as a metaverse that has a broad application other than its game, right? So I haven't seen anything short of maybe some of the Decentraland or Sandbox stuff that is, well, frankly, I don't like any of the things that I've seen in there yet. It's too blocky for me, but it doesn't. That to me seems more like a place where people go to socialize, where Star Atlas seems to be building as a place where people go to get work done, and maybe a more corporate aspect to it in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question, Jesse. I was having this conversation with my brother like 2 days ago, and because we're talking about what projects I like or whatever, and Star Atlas I think is just moving forward at a rate and with a strategy that is at a level that's much higher than you're seeing with other projects. I mean, I could go and talk about like certain Cardano projects and things like that are actually trying to build solid metaverses where they're actually trying to interact with the real world and things like that are going way beyond what Decentraland and whatnot are doing. But going back to what I told Chypto earlier, I hear economists mentioned a lot more when we're looking at Star Atlas. And you don't hear that with most of these projects out here. And you look at all these games that we've previously been invested into, some we've made money on, some we've lost it. And the fact is that nobody's ever done any of this before. And so if you don't have actual economists working on your project there with you every step of the way, I mean, the chances of failure are rather high if you're not taking that seriously.
Not just the chances of failure, but the chances of building yourself into a corner where you identify something later and can't fix it. So that's why the foundation is so important.
That's the thing that I love about the fact that we're being exposed loop by loop, because we're really seeing the game be built. And, we're going to be in a year, we're going to be able to look back and say that ties all the way back to last, February when this launched. And it's such a unique perspective that we're being exposed to on game development.
Well, that's one more key that I didn't get to mention with Chypto, but because he's very transparent, and the Star Atlas team has been very transparent, and that level of transparency is something that I don't think is equal across the current metaverses being built either. The focus on economists and the focus on being as transparent as possible, even to the point where it's a little uncomfortable for them sometimes because they'll have a update one week that doesn't really match the update they had the previous week. But we all respect that because we respect the transparency, you know.
That was one of the first things that attracted me to the project was interviews with Michael Wagner and how transparent he was being. And I think that set the tone to demonstrate that they understand the necessity of transparency and community involvement for the scale of this project. If you're a project that literally wants to keep tight wraps around it, you can say it's for the game lore and you're trying to save it for the fun. But for the most part, that's a bit of an excuse, and most people read through that. But if you're not, for what the scale of what they're trying to build, if you don't get community involvement, which requires transparency and trust, then there's some, to me, it leads towards there being some other reason why you're not sharing that information. And so I like the fact that they saw it was important to be transparent and open and communicate with the way they have with their town halls and the way that they communicate with us to say, hey, here's what we're doing.
It's kind of funny because real fancy, real quick. The funny thing about that transparency is I think it starts to wear thin on Wagner sometimes because you'll see him say things like, I've said this 100 times. I say this every town hall. Like you can tell he's getting annoyed at the regular questions, and I just kind of chuckle. But I mean, that's a part of being transparent. You're going to end up repeating things over and over and over again. Sorry, Fancy.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly answer this question about noble cloaks and noble singers because I have all the assets loaded up for this show. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if they give any access to voting rights or rooms, but they look cool.
I think they'll. Yeah.
The human actually looks pretty cool. Speaking as an Oni, the human actually looks pretty cool in that picture.
You know, I hate to say this, but that looks like the outfit that that leader of the World Economic Forum got busted in on one of those videos. Klaus Schwab or whatever his name is.
Secret society.
Yeah. But I can't imagine it gives you. Maybe it gives you access, but to me, it seems like clothing would be buff related.
Yeah, it seems like they're wearing it in this poster, so that could just be like a historical clout.
Like the Armstrong patch, right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Going back to what you were saying about the same questions being asked, shout out to the community. We're reaching that point ourselves where people are asking questions that we've covered, you know, on previous podcasts multiple times, or that a guest covered earlier, you know, that he was talking about in the beginning, and they might have just tuned in, and so they're asking a question that the guy already talked about, and so, you know, we're having to deal with that as well, and you know, I think the community understands that.
Yeah, and we get the luxury of just saying, hey, these are our thoughts. He has to speak to the brand of the game and things like that too. There's a lot of pressure. Some of the things that I wish we would have gotten to with Chypto is what the Star Atlas looks like, right? What game does he envision it looking like? There's a number of different versions of a star map, and how you navigate it. Eves is pretty available if you get on YouTube. Elite Dangerous is pretty available if you get on YouTube. I probably need to pay more attention to Stellaris now because they keep bringing up that game, and
it's a good game.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that I was struggling not to ask so that we didn't get derailed, because it could be a whole other show. And that is, as we were talking about planets and land and things like that, like we theory crafted quite a bit on this in the past. We know that there could be up to 64 different land plots on a planet, but is that like a large planet? Are there going to be other small planets where there's only 30 or 15 or whatever? And how many planets? Like how big is a faction? How do the factions overlap with deep space? How if you have 3 factions, but you also have 3 zones, how does that work? You know, so yeah, understanding what that map might look like and how big it is, that's just this big open-ended question for me.
Well, he did reaffirm Dyson Sphere for a planetary system. So that to me tells us that if you want to be a guild who's going to build a Dyson Sphere for the benefit of your faction or your guild, you should probably have a controlling state in a planetary system. That's what it seems like. But we've also talked in the past about how Dyson Spheres might be a faction-related tool. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, personally, I would like for us to, be able to do our own thing with Dyson spheres, but I understand that how powerful that could be. And
Yeah.
so you come against this issue of do you want the power to be more available to more people, and so thereby the power becomes reduced, or do you want it to be a huge thing like we were talking about with Chypto as far as a titanship, like maybe it's a faction thing as opposed to a guild thing, these are all good ideas, and it's you gotta balance a game in a careful way, especially when you have all these finances in there. So it's something that I'm glad they're engaging with us about and not just, dropping stuff on us.
Well,
As we go ahead,
go ahead,
Benjo.
Jesse.
I was going to say, as we talked about, the impact of a Titan within the whole gameplay, and we have the factions, and we're talking about Dyson spheres, and we're talking about all these different things that kind of feel like they really should be more end game or things that you're working towards rather than being introduced right away. I could see a phase in the very beginning, like right now, we're going to be seeding the economy with cream. We're going to, as you start to initiate some of the loops around the extra small ships for blueprints, and you're starting to do some crafting for the 4Rs that we need, that we consume for our ship missions. This is beginning to seed the economy. Then from there, I could see it where for the first year or so, even, you're so wrapped up in establishing your own territorial dominance within your faction that you don't need these end game things. And I don't think we want to go there that quick. That should be something that develops naturally over time. There's so much gameplay to be had within the regions and within the faction, and then trying to get resources and smuggling them from other factions and things like that, that to jump so far out to these big dominant game factors, I think that kind of takes away from what we could make happen early game.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
think
good
with
point,
previous
Jesse,
great.
because that's a
I
good
think-
point, Jesse. Oh.
I think with previous games, Ray brought up a good point with Eve. The ship that was like the ship that was everybody wanted became commonplace, and the unfortunate thing is every game now is going to say, well, where's our version of this? And they're going to want it sooner than later. So I think the cycle is going to be faster than we probably want from a longevity perspective. Sorry, guys.
It's all good, brother, all the time. But back to what you were saying, Jesse, kind of going counter to what you're saying, Banjo, the game's not even seeded. The economy's not seeded yet, like he was saying. So how do you balance a Titan or a Dyson sphere when you don't know what ore is and you don't know what steel is versus diamonds versus gold is yet? How do you know they have the economy is being built still.
Yeah.
So you can't go to these huge. You can't build the Empire State Building. You never built a wood house before, and you don't even know what that costs. How do you sell the Empire State Building before anybody's ever built a wooden house? It's just it's kind of one of those things that I feel like it needs to go a little slower.
Yeah, for sure. They're going for a modular approach. I showed this earlier, and what's in green is done, yellow's ongoing, orange is soon, red is when. And you can figure out where everything will fit into this, like all the things that are released right now. Like I don't expect badges or posters to become available, at least until the Star Atlas 3D browser. And there's a lot of things that are outside of the scope of their current roadmap, but there is a lot in here at the moment. And when you read through it, one thing I thought about properly for the first time was below score tier 1 ship missions, leveling up role licenses for account bound perks. And that's going to be really interesting with all the different types of roles there are in this game, like all the different types of things you can do and how your early choices might affect what you're going to do later.
I think that with regards to that Titan, I think that in a big resource coming into the game early, that I think it was Ronald from the comments, I think that's honestly the best compromise. It does two things, because the thing that I still don't have an answer for is what does it serve for Star Atlas? My immediate assumption is that it serves the need to raise some additional funds. So beyond that, what does it serve for the gameplay mechanics and for the economy as a whole. I don't know that one. So one of the things that by selling the blueprint, which means you now have the right to build, it addresses that Star Atlas need, if the capital part is a need, but it also slows the process of that being built, and it becomes this thing that now becomes a part of the gameplay process. I love that idea. If that's something they would consider.
I thought it was a great idea too when we had it on the screen, because also what that also allows is it allows you to understand what they can have the blueprint out and it can cost so much of X, Y, and Z, but you don't have to know what all those little things cost yet. You know, and that changes things as well.
What do you guys think is going to be locked behind resources? So it seems to me that there's going to be a blueprint that needs diamond, right? Mm-hmm. So is that how we delay those mega structures? Is it needs resources that are just not going to be gotten in the first year or two?
Unobtainium.
Yeah, there we go. Unobtainium. I mean, because diamond, obviously, everyone wants to find the diamond planet. There has to be a use for that resource for everyone to want it so badly, right?
I would think you could use a scarce resource as well as a skill. Like you have to be so adept, it requires, whatever name you want to give in place of the word engineer. You have to have achieved this level of skill to be able to even manufacture this component that needs this scarce resource. So I think there's a number of levers you could pull to slow down that development process.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the things we're discussing will happen. It's not like we're the only people talking about this. I'm sure I would love to be a fly on the wall on their dev roundtables and really talk about what this stuff, the reality of the timelines that they're thinking.
Yeah.
So, Jesse, do you want to bring us on to what we have for Metaverse news?
Yeah, sure. Are we ready to transition for that? You bet. Let me pull that up here. So, yeah, essentially all I did today before the show was just grab a couple of screenshots on the things that kind of stood out, that are relevant to this space as a whole. And let me pull that up on the screen there. And this was one that was obviously, a big one because it's, Meta, which is what triggered a lot of leaps in value that people placed on projects within the metaverse. But of course, they, based on their quarterly earnings, they dropped by 8%, which then triggered a 22% drop in their shares, which was insane. And then somewhere along this article, which was in the New York Times, it talked about them having spent $10 billion in the past year, which is more than what they even acquired their VR Oculus for. Yeah. So yeah, but there's so much more to this. And as I was going through the metaverse news, and love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, there's an interesting thing that's happening right now. Because metaverse has become such a buzzword, everyone and their cousin is trying to figure out how to incorporate their news and their stories into what's happening and impacting the metaverse, whether it really does or not. This one was a catalyst for sure, but the big thing that, in my opinion, being that Facebook was kind of like my past life, I spent a lot of time and energy with clients working with Facebook ads and that sort of thing. They just peaked out. They were in such a rapid growth stage of people joining their network where they literally had almost 25 to almost 30% of the entire planet using their platform. There's not more people to continue that upward trend. So at some point they were going to level off. And that's part of what we're experiencing now, which is also why Zuckerberg's like, hey man, we got to pivot.
And what's ironic too is that none of these big corporations or CEOs that direct their big companies into the metaverse are the ones that are necessarily going to build it the way that it already has been built to a certain extent. They don't know, like, it's already here. It's already here, and they're just now joining in to an already created metaverse that they have to acclimate to. It's not them at the head of the ship gonna now, take over in any way. It's because how does one person or a group of people who weren't ever involved in the metaverse it's like your elderly boomer parents telling you about cell phones, and you're just gonna be like, okay, well, it's already invented. You just need to learn about it now, and then once you get acclimated to what's already here, then you'll step down from that high horse of like, oh, I didn't know what I was talking about. I looked like a fool, and although I have all the money to buy all the phones, you know,
I
it
feel
puts people in their place.
I feel actually more like we're in a battle or a new war that a lot of people don't understand is happening yet. I think that the metaverse is being built, and there's all these actors trying to get their piece of it and gain their own position. Everybody's fighting for positioning right now, and I think that where the masses of us tend to focus our energy, our attention, and our monetary value is going to determine where things kind of go as far as who's going to be in more control. And I think Facebook, with the meta changes, they're trying to grab a piece of the metaverse. I'm curious, Jess, do you have any knowledge on where this 10 billion was spent? Like, was it spent on VR, or was it spent on acquiring games, or was it spent on
It was the
like trying to
metaverse.
build something out?
A good question, and I was trying to search for that myself in the article, and it's basically on this. And I can't say it was all 10 billion of that, but a big portion of the focus and influence was in hiring and placing people on projects that are going to be around building out the stuff that he's demonstrated. I don't know if you followed the Meta channel on YouTube, which is interesting.
No, I
They have a
haven't, yeah.
YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't specify exactly where, because that is a lot of money.
So
You would
picks
think
and
that-
shovels to
Yeah.
kind of get it started, but basically where they're
Exactly.
spending the money right now. So,
Yep.
that kind of goes back to what I'm saying, because, all the other competing metaverses, whether it's Star Atlas, Axie Infinity, whatever, nobody has a perfect home yet. Even like Decentraland and Sandbox, which to me seem to be the more successful ones right now. They don't really have a whole lot going on, like Banjo mentioned earlier. So, I think everybody's kind of fighting for a position, and hopefully I want to see a place where you're able to move through all these metaverses freely, and they're all decentralized and powered to the point where you have reasons to go and visit different metaverses. You're not trapped into the IOI situation we've talked about before.
Yeah.
Well, PG brings up a good point. Libra was a fail. That was their cryptocurrency initiative. And they just sold their Libra IP to another company, an investment company, I believe. So,
You know what? It wasn't a fail, though, as a result of it just not working. They got pushback from
They got crushed.
political pushback. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And rightfully so. I mean, I think a company, this is maybe a personal opinion here, but companies like Facebook, companies like Google, they already collect tons of data on us, and now they're going to collect our real purchasing habits if we're using their coins. Yeah. That's one of my concerns about the metaverse too, is tying our actions to our behaviors in a metaverse. How is that really going to show up, and who's going to be selling that data to other people?
And what I saw with Libra was them doing something that we all kind of know instinctively is a no-no, which is they were kind of positioning themselves to compete with the US dollar. And this is the thing that I go back to all the time when I talk about decentralization in these gaming platforms that we want to get into, is at some point you're going to be competing with countries. If you're a metaverse where people are going and living and earning and bringing money back to the real world, you're going to be competing with other countries. And so if you're not decentralized to a certain point, what is your defense going to be when they come down on you, just like they did on Libra? We saw them get crushed fairly quickly. They were in hearings, and then all of a sudden all the companies that were on board just quietly stepped back. So we know that those were, phone calls and emails getting sent, and they went on ahead and made the right move, right? So what's to say that's not going to happen with these metaverse projects once they start really taking hold? Like Axie Infinity kind of took hold of the Philippines, but that was the Philippines. That wasn't the USA.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting for sure.
I think the equivalent of the fintech companies are kind of already here. Axie being one of them, Star Atlas, and specific to their genre of game, because they're all kind of coming at the place differently when it comes to genre, like space for Star Atlas and so on. But it would be like us not talking about Facebook or Microsoft and only talking about games or companies that are not large cap but mid cap. If we only focus on mid cap, then where's the ship going? If these guys Microsoft, Blizzard, and so on are the ones making these moves that are directing the most of the population's attention, right? So if they have the most attention on them, it's only right that we do the equivalent in the space and learn from them or from their failures, from their success, their successes and failures. But yeah.
I want to show you guys something here real quick that I want to stop. I want to share a different screen. And this is just an observation that I've been making recently about, which one is this one here? There we go. About what's kind of happening in this space as it relates to the metaverse. And what I'm on right now is I'm looking at CoinGecko, and I'm looking at, like, this is the top market capitalization for what's happening in crypto. And so by category, you got smart contracts platform right at the top. Then you have ecosystem after ecosystem, stablecoin, all ecosystems. This is the roadway. This is the infrastructure being built. And then upon what do you build it on? And even with the current crypto storm going on, if we go to see what's happened within the 7-day stretch, look what's up there. The biggest growth is in fan tokens, music, play to earn, GameFi, Metaverse, NFTs. So this is the stuff that's starting to sprout up, that's being built on top of those infrastructures. This is the Metaverse. This is what's being built on those roadways that are being built with all those ecosystems. And so you see companies like Meta wanting to figure out, how do we get involved in this? Because if we don't, we're missing out, because this is obviously a rocket ship that's going somewhere.
See, some big companies like Adidas and Pepsi and they've dabbled within the top 3 or 4, 5, 6 here. Ethereum's mainnet, like they've made NFTs, they've sold NFTs, so they're dipping their toes in, which warms up a couple of people who might have just entered the NFT space. Like, oh, this isn't just a scam, because look, Budweiser's here. Oh, Pepsi, wow, they wouldn't be here if it wasn't legitimate. Oh, I'm going to secure my place here in the NFT space by purchasing one of their NFTs. Okay, well, that's fine. But sure enough, it doesn't end there. And then the rabbit hole just goes deeper and deeper. And then once you branch out, you just see the distinct differences of a centralized type of system with these legacy companies coming in versus what's already been here for the last decade or less than that. But it's moving fast. And this is where everything is being built on. Like as the chart just shows, this the networks. Not everyone will last. Just like in 2017, there was a lot of tokens that just went bust. The ICO, the IDO craze of the time. We've passed that, and now anyone who does an IDO, it's just like, okay, buddy, you just want money, So outliers are going to be noticed, especially from those who've been around the longest. But some people, it's just a learning curve, and a lot of understanding is going to be needed to not get screwed over, and then feel like it's not a space for you, but it will be.
Hey Jesse, can you bring that back up, that chart you just had?
Oh, you bet. 1 second here.
So what I found interesting about that chart is that if you look at that for the 7-day, the top gainers, we're actually looking at the pieces, the building blocks of the metaverse. So you got fan token, right? That's meme culture. So that's culture. That's social culture right there. That's what these meme token things are. And then you got music, obviously that's culture. Play to earn, which is gaming, GameFi, gaming, metaverse, also the metaverse, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which is culture, also gaming. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing, you got to go down quite a ways before you start seeing like the old DeFi stuff that we were used to seeing in the crypto market. Right now, the metaverse is taking off. And it's really interesting, really dangerous, but really interesting. And I'm happy to be here, able to just watch this thing grow, because there's so much opportunity. It blows my mind.
Well, speaking of fiction becoming reality, there was another story that's not metaverse related that came out. But if you tie 3 stories together, it's kind of scary. So you've got metaverses. What everyone wants to go into. They want to go and check out of life and check into the metaverse. Then you've got, international global bodies saying you'll want for nothing, you'll own nothing. And then you've got China, this is the story that I'm talking about, who just announced that they have developed a way to create human life in a vat with babies. So it's kind of like the Matrix coming true, right?
Are they NFTs? Wow. Can you buy them?
I want to flip them babies.
Yeah, it was pointed out here as Sandbox, man. Sandbox winning. I mean, it's interesting. We see the two big blips even on the metaverse news from Meta news, Facebook Meta from a couple months ago. Those were the two that got big boosts out of that. I think that they are the most accessible to mainstream as to if someone says, well, what is the metaverse? Probably the two that you can identify and speak to the easiest as projects are probably Sandbox and Decentraland, which is why they are really getting a lift right now across all these spaces, play to earn, GameFi.
They're the
metaverse.
easiest to understand.
Yeah.
What's that blue diamond there? Is that Axie or
AXS?
Yeah, it's Axie.
so there you go right there, because Axie was the first actual metaverse economy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they've been struggling obviously, but it's nobody's ever done it before. They were the first to do it for any period successfully, you know. So it makes sense why they're up there as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like if you go at least below the surface level of any one layer one that's out there, you're gonna find those diamonds in the rough, or those AXS Axie Infinity type projects that are now the most total lock value on that layer, for what it's worth. So you got the DeFi Kingdoms on Harmony, right, and then you have on Avalanche. I haven't gone too deep with knowing which one is there, but these are more like game type of these are more games, NFT games on these networks, because each one has a DEX, each one has so the more you get situated with what every layer one needs to survive and to stay around, then you'll have a better, well-versed, understanding of what you should do, and then what to do after an Axie Infinity popped up on any layer one. And then what's going to follow? Copycats. There's going to be multiple projects that are going to copycat what was the most successful. And then you could probably front run those opportunities, but not bet the whole farm, because they might not do it as well, or maybe they would. But it all takes time and effort to learn, and then you go deeper into the dev teams and the white papers, and it's like a whole rabbit hole of information to get into to feel confident enough to have your money in there long term.
Well, it's getting harder and harder to do that, right? I mean, if you go on Twitter and do #metaverse, everyone's selling the next greatest project.
Right.
Everyone's got it's all a big bunch of rug pulls on there now. And it's hard to weed out the good stuff through the bad stuff.
Well, and especially because to make something newsworthy, it's the objective of a marketing team for every company to say, okay, this is an active buzzword. What can we do to make a connection with that, whether it's relevant or not? And that just muddies the water to be able to sift through things that are actually relevant.
I mean, let's be honest, Jesse. We were early adopters on that, because when we rebranded our name, what did? We took it before Facebook did. Metaverse Nomads. Yeah. I really like what you were saying, Ray, as far as different networks and copycatting, because that's something that I've been paying a lot of attention to lately. Is the different layer ones, right? So you got Solana, like we were just looking at that chart from Jesse. A lot of that stuff was on Ethereum based or side chains of Ethereum. We haven't really seen the huge Ethereum level explosions on Solana and Cardano, but they're booming right now. So, Cardano, there's a lot of Cardano people. I know people on Cardano who didn't even get into NFTs until Cardano had them, and then you got Blockstack, which is Stacks token, and they're on, Bitcoin. So a lot of Bitcoin maximalists are they like that, and that's where the city coins are coming from, right? So you have these different layer ones, you have these different, and they're all kind of competing, and they're all kind of copying each other right now. And the question is, are they all going to continue to grow together, or are some of them going to fall off? But there's amazing opportunities in looking at these different layer ones and kind of diversifying into them as well, and not being solely on the ETH chains.
Yeah. Exactly. And then to respect each project developing on whatever layer they are developing on, each one might be doing something different than the last quote unquote Axie Infinity in their own right? They're like, for CyberKongs, they're on the EVM, so they're on Ethereum, but they just came out with lock registry, multi-lock registry, which is a spin on what usually is staking, where you lock up and then you can't do anything else with that NFT because it's fixed in that one contract to earn a reward, a staking reward. But they just created something that hasn't been seen on any layer, and it's not that you can do this now with any Ethereum NFT, right, on the Ethereum network. But just a brief description here. It says a new multi-lock registry was designed and implemented alongside the Jungle Adventure contract because the game is coming out for CyberConks, VXs, and babies, and it's staking is a thing of the past. Now we lock. So the purpose of the multi-lock registry is to offer the benefits of staking without the need to send your valuable assets to a smart contract that could eventually be compromised or cause a huge loss. The multi-lock registry allows CyberConk VX to be locked in the holder's own wallet by inhibiting the token to be transferred. When adding the CyberConk VX to a crew, which is max 5 to send on an adventure, it gets locked in the registry and cannot be transferred out of the wallet until unlocked by the owner. So to unlock a CyberConks VX, it simply needs to remove from the crew, which will then allow the normal transfer as usual. This will make you lose. So it's an item in the game. You wouldn't be able to lose that item in the game. And then, so more or less, this is a CyberConks new innovation that brings a huge advantage to staking because CyberConks VX can be used simultaneously with our registries, whitelisted contracts, and games that need to check the token in your wallet and any other utilizing this technology. So you would still earn your rewards having your asset staked, your NFT staked, but then you could still do many other things as signing off contracts or validating you own the NFT. So I could see Star Atlas implementing something like this, where you can still stake your ship and earn rewards. And if you needed to use it in space, you would still be earning rewards, but you wouldn't be at any risk. And it's like a multi-benefit for. But that's the thing. The devs on the team for CyberConks, they're innovative, and they're doing things that are different that have never.
They're some of the best.
Before. Yeah, pretty much. And Owl of Moisture. That's his name. That guy's from old school OG from the Axie Infinity community. So, and then even with the subnets on Avalanche, right? That's a whole other innovative thing that's happening on there, which I won't get into here, but you could just Google it. And Delphi Digital has a nice interview with the CEO of Avalanche, and he goes into how it's going to be a more efficient model that people will come around to understanding, and then probably implementing on their own layer one. So if you just stick to Solana, it's in beta. There's traffic problems. Like what's the most innovative thing happening on Solana? Certain games being built on it, but the network itself, like what is it doing and what is it trying to achieve that's different than another network? Because in the long haul, the games might still be around because you can always put your game somewhere else. It might be a huge task, but is the network going to be around? There's networks that fell through the cracks and ended back in 2017 that we don't see around today. So it's going to be an interesting journey years to come down the line.
Wow. So that was the news for Meta. In addition to that, we've got a couple other news bits here. As I mentioned this on the show earlier, like last year, 2021, there was 501 million in metaverse real estate that had sold, and it's expected to double this year. So it just kind of goes to show some of the emphasis that's being placed and money moving in. And not all of this, by the way, is just individuals. There's actually auction houses. There was one within the past month that spent a couple million on some metaverse land. And you're starting to see this as an investment that groups are looking at as well, rather than just individuals, of course.
I got exposed through one of my Twitter accounts that there's a company right now that's building metaverse real estate agents, right? And they develop them, and they have this course. It's like $400. I'm half tempted to pull the trigger just to see what it is, but looking at the curriculum, it's a lot of bringing people up to speed, like real estate agents, terrestrial real estate agents, up to speed on crypto and metaverse and NFTs. But I think the goal of this company is to allow people to have a resource they can go to do this work instead of having to figure it all out, which makes complete sense because there's going to be people who want to put money into this stuff but don't know where to start. And if you have a metaverse real estate agent that's credentialed in some fashion, you might get a better chance of doing something right and making less mistakes.
I might have to switch careers, Banjo. I'm gonna need that info offline, my guy.
I'll give it to you, man.
Some other metaverse news here. Who's using the metaverse? poker players now in Decentraland, their daily user count is up to over 5,000 that are just in Decentraland at a casino. And that casino has brought in 7.5 million in just the past 3 months or so. So, we talked about this on past shows about how human nature and the things that we do in the real world, all of these things that are aspects of being human are going to show up somewhere in the metaverse. But we're already seeing, the wagering and the gambling, even within Decentraland, it seems.
And I'll tell you what, so my PFP right now in Discord is actually something that I'm not going to promote or suggest anybody get a part of, but it is the Secret Society, and they are talking about building casinos in the metaverse and getting celebrities to shout them out and things like that. This is a space that's booming right now as far as gambling in the metaverse. My brother showed me a video one day of a guy who actually took a job working in a casino, just being the guy to help the people, figure out how to play the games in that casino or whatever. And I think he was like working like 4 days a week for like 6 hours or something like that.
Yeah, interesting. Metaverse calls here. NFTs construct virtual economies to stay relevant in 2022. Come on, we all knew that already. But what I thought was interesting and funny about this one here is that buzzword, utility. NFTs got to carry some utility with them now. And that's what makes them forward looking. So, yeah, we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think that we blew through that phase real quick where, you just have an NFT project because it's got cool art. It's like, no, got to have some utility now for it to make any sense.
Yeah, and all of this will take place because we demand it. The Gala Games, that's the main issue with them. They don't have anything. There's no utility to anything you buy, and they come out. Bitbender says it. You don't deserve to get anything. You don't get shit for holding anything. That's literally what he said after you just buy it. So for what it's worth, maybe he would be bunched, in my opinion, bunched in with the rest of these people who are still on that learning curve. The Microsofts, the Facebooks of the world, right? So they're still behind on what's actually been happening for a long while.
Yeah. Someone actually had mentioned it a couple times in the comments, and we just didn't have any time to go into it on this show with Miranda's updates and all that sort of thing. But I can tell you from my own observations, there's been only 2 updates this year in the announcement section for Miranda. So nobody really knows where development is there. Behind, which is why we've kind of directed our attention elsewhere, is that we saw the writing on the wall that it was going to be a long time before we saw anything tangible. When you ask someone what's the utility of something and they say, what are you talking about? All right, we'll be back when you know.
And on the dark side, I think myself and I think Banjo as well have both mentioned this several times. The NFT metaverse boom of our time right now reminds me of the ICO boom of 2017, and how many of those projects are still around. If you look at the top 10 coins, I think I was just looking at it the other day, it's like 4 of them or 5 of them that are still there. You know what I mean? So, that's where we're at kind of right now in the current market. In 2024, what's still going to be there?
I'll take it another level down, Bonafide, and I think we're seeing the first digital beanie baby in many cases with NFTs.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other thing here, that last slide that I've got, and this is, I think, exciting news, and that is Coinbase listing Solana-based projects. We haven't seen Atlas hit Coinbase yet, but based on this news, it's probably not too far behind. We've heard some whispers of it. They've already put these 2 that we see listed here on there, but that just means that it couldn't be much further behind. And of course, once that happened, it's most likely to give a little bit of a lift to and accessibility to Atlas. So that's exciting. And then who knows what exchanges will pick it up from there. So these are all things that help us grow in the right direction. One thing that I didn't have as a piece of news, but I think it's important, and it's to be wary that there is a piece of malware that's been circulating out there that targets about 40 wallets right now, calls Mars Stealer. And it's pretty savvy stuff, and it's you won't really even see it. Can show up and then be gone. It targets browsers, And I don't even think it's operating system specific, but it's just something to be aware of, that things like this are developing. So, start putting measures in place to make sure your stuff is safe, because it's specifically looking for particular domains, particular exchanges, and it is targeting key phrases and passwords, and it is all about trying to access your crypto. So,
do you know the vector, Jesse? Is it something you open in email, or you go to a web page and it downloads a pixel, or do you know what drives it?
Yeah, good question. And I didn't have too much time, which is why I don't even have a slide around it, because I was trying to figure all that out so I could be a bit more informed. But it is, I would imagine you would have to download something. It is very light, though, and being that it is targeting browsers, and it does clean up behind itself, meaning like it will also exit once it gets what it needs.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, anything else, Jesse or Fancy?
That's it for news for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a good show.
Very good. So who wants to announce our guests for next week?
Well, we spoke about it a bit last week. It's going to be MMA Metaverse Mining Alliance, and we're going to talk about how you structure a blockchain guild.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say that it is probably getting well known at this point that Rome is not into alliances. We just have a firm stance that there's so little known about what an alliance and Star Atlas could mean and what it could do for you, so it doesn't make any sense to have that. But MMA, who has flown pretty much under the radar for quite some time, they're quite savvy in the on-chain aspect of what it might mean to be to make a business of your guild. And so we've been exploring what that means with them. And so we want to have a conversation with them about that here on the show, and expose you, the listening audience, conversations around like, well, what does that mean? And this is also, I've seen some news around this recently. Play to Earn is showing up. Actually, Coin Bureau. Coin Bureau just literally he just put out a video 2 days ago about the whole gaming guilds, and about how if you got play to earn, that speaks to the individual, but now you're starting to see the growth of guilds that are showing up. Say, how do we make a business out of this? How do we actually make a business of a guild? So we're going to have that as a conversation next week with MMA.
I think that's fantastic. And I think if you're going to have assets that need to be deployed into a game, it makes sense that you have organizations that are basically a business that run your assets for you. So I'm excited to hear that conversation next week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this a lot. Sorry, Benji. I'm looking forward to the conversation a lot. These guys are approaching the space in a way that, like, I don't think no one else is. And, we've agreed to have them on. So, I think this is going to be pretty good, a pretty good conversation about game economies overall with them. And, MMA, they're the guild, about guilds and businesses, like more centered around that, and potential rewards for hedging medium-sized guilds. So
I mean, that was the reason for us all coming together in the beginning, right? It's like you're putting a bunch of money into this space. How do you protect yourself? How do you leverage yourself where you need to associate yourself with like-minded individuals? So we all did that for ourselves and came together with Fancy and did Rome. And, you got other guilds out there doing similar things. And, shout out to the Star Atlas community, because a lot of the guilds that we see out there, some are, interesting, and some are really doing some impactful things out there in the space. So I think we're all probably open to having conversations with other guilds in the future. I think we've done maybe one in the past with a couple other guild leaders, but I think it's interesting for us all to start talking about what it takes to be out here, and how we can all interact together in a way that's profitable for everybody.
No, I agree 100%. Looking forward to the conversation. And with that said, it's time to bid goodbye to the community. We'll see you next week. It's been a fantastic episode with Chypto and the other stuff that we discussed. We're so happy that you're all here. Please like and subscribe. We'll be here next week.
We've got a new outro.
And we've got a new outro. So please wait for our outro. And I think we all tend to be pretty proud of this one. So have a great week, everyone.
Atlas Miner, you were born to push the block in search of ore. Now it's time that you are gone. So farewell, Atlas Miner. And farewell, Mud and ONI too. Who's the sector same to you? The pirate bastards ran him through. So farewell, Atlas Miner. They promised you a diamond mine, but I'll be damned, it's hard to find. I hope there's justice for their crimes. And farewell, Atlas Miner. And farewell, friend, don't take it hard. Getting killed ain't all that bad. They'll treat you well in the repair yard. So farewell, Atlas Miner.